Good morning. Welcome to the New York City Council hearing on the Committee on Public Housing. At this time, please silence all electronics and do not approach the dais. I repeat, please do not approach the dais. If you are testifying today or have any questions or concerns, please contact the Sergeant at Arms. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, you may begin.
I'm calling this meeting to order this morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this hearing of the Committee on Public Housing for the New York City Council. I'm Councilmember Chris Banks, the chair of this committee, and I'm glad to be joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Aviles and Councilmember Ayala. Today, we hold an oversight hearing on vacancies, transfers of NYCHA, and additionally, we will be hearing two pieces of legislation. Introduction 111, sponsored by Councilmember Aviles, which required NYCHA to report on vacant public housing units, and Introduction 122, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Ayala, which require NYPD to publish crime data for each NYCHA development. On this committee, we spent a lot of time talking about what needs to be improved at NYCHA. And its vacancies and transfer process are certainly on that list. But before getting to that, I want to take a minute to remind all of us of what we're fighting for. Public housing is a gem of this city. Country for nearly 100 years. When done well, public housing stands for the value that everyone deserves to have a home. And especially in a time where we're seeing an affordable housing crisis, soaring costs of living, and attacks from the federal government, we should be protecting and uplifting public housing at all costs. If I'm critical of NYCHA, it's because I believe that we can do better and we must do better. But we need to have a conversation about how we actually get folks housed in New York City public housing. For years, the number of vacant NYCHA units have been on a rise from less than 500 in 2021, and 3,000 in 2022, and to nearly 6,000 to today. Over the past year, an average of 75 apartments became vacant each month, more than 2 new vacant units every day, while hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers sit on NYCHA's waiting list, waiting for a place to live. I want to stress that when we talk about vacancies, we're not just talking about empty apartments. We're talking about residents of this city who are waiting for access to decent and safe housing. And often these are New Yorkers in incredibly vulnerable situations. A December 2024 report by the Legal Services New York City found that survivors of gender-based violence are sometimes waiting years for a transfer, despite being in danger in their current housing. And that is simply unacceptable. And NYCHA is placed housing in each year, reaching a 10-year low last year, even as the homeless population in New York City reaches its historic highs. I recognize that it takes a lot of time and money to make vacant units suitable for new tenants, especially some of these older units that require extensive rehabilitation. And I greatly appreciate that NYCHA is putting more care into this work than it has in the past. Public housing residents, no less than any other residents, deserve to have safe, clean, and functioning housing. But when it takes a full year to turn around one vacant unit, we need to question why and try to find a better way. I hope that this hearing will shed some light on why vacancies are increasing and taking so long to fill, what tenants are looking for in their fair and transparent placement policy, and how these processes can be improved to get more folks into decent public housing quickly and safely. I would like to thank my staff, Michael Lambert, Kyle Graham, along with Public Housing Committee staff, Jose, Charles, Jack, Reese, James, Sierra, for all the work they've put into this hearing. I will now turn it over to my colleagues to speak about their bills, and I recognize our Deputy Speaker, Madam Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to talk about Intro 122. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. It's a very simple bill, but it's a bill that would require that NYCHA publish crime data for each development, and I find that this is information that I'm lacking in my community. I represent the largest stock of public housing of any elected official citywide, and it is very difficult for me to ascertain where we need resources to, to be evenly distributed throughout my community, because I don't know. I hear rumors and I hear, there's a beef between this development and that development, and we have a higher rate of domestic violence, in the community. But I don't have any idea where specifically, because NYCHA doesn't report. The NYPD does not report specifically on violence that is occurring at the NYCHAs, other than maybe reporting on it at the local PSA meetings. But there's no published data, and I think that is a disservice. Knowing what I know, living in the community that I represent, and how challenging it is, I would really welcome more information and more transparency in regards to what's happening at my developments. I want to echo the chair's sentiments about domestic violence families having to wait years to be able to get transferred. I've had instances where I've had women call me and they are paying the rent for months and months on end and staying with relatives because they don't feel safe living there while they wait for a transfer. I don't see how that is fair. I have a senior also at one of my developments whose son was murdered, and she was forced to live next door to her son's murderer's family for 2 years. She was afraid to come out of her apartment, and we had to intervene to get her moved. And then I have another senior that lives at a senior housing development, and I was door knocking not so long ago, who invited me in, and she was so happy to see me because she wanted to share with me. She wanted me to see for myself the conditions in her apartment. And when she lives in a studio apartment in a building that's transferring over to PACT, and when she opened her closet door, where all of her belongings are, because again, keep in mind this is a studio apartment, it was full of black mold. Black mold. Her living quarters, her sleeping quarters, which is technically the living room / bedroom, again, mold everywhere. And it's been, I would say, maybe now close to 6 weeks, and I still haven't been able to get her transferred out because they need to move her to a first or second floor because of mobility issues. And I'm just flabbergasted that there hasn't been a discussion with her about possibly moving her out to another development while this is happening. Black mold is dangerous. Older adults are already suffering from, other ailments. There's no need, there's no under the sun for why anyone I saw for myself. And I know that she is not the exception. She is the rule, the rule. And I really would hope to see better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you, Chair Banks. And thank you, council members, for being here today, and the public, and also NYCHA. Thank you for getting Intro 111 on the agenda today. This legislation was introduced in the last session to address this issue of rising vacancies at NYCHA during a time of a housing and homelessness crisis. This legislation would require NYCHA to provide a report on the units that have been vacant for more than 30 continuous days. The report would include the reasons why the unit was vacant to supplement the public information on NYCHA's website, which shows an alarming growth in the number of vacant units across NYCHA's property. During our last hearing, NYCHA testified that much of the information required in this bill is already being reported. Today, we'd like to drill down on where this legislation might enhance the current reporting requirements. So we look forward to hearing more from NYCHA today and how we can work together, not only on this piece of legislation, but certainly on the others. And on the note of the transfer situation is appalling. It has taken our office well over a year to transfer people facing violence. And it's particularly appalling when you look at it and you know that there are thousands of vacant units in NYCHA. It becomes so impossible to explain to someone who is experiencing violence when they see 4 units in their building are empty, that nothing can be done. So we need to get this right. We need to get it moving and make sure that our residents are safe. We need a transfer situation that actually is unstuck, that can make sure that the health and wellness of our residents are first and foremost, particularly in a housing crisis. And so I look forward, obviously, to pushing this forward and making sure that there is accountability. We have a lot of information. Much of it doesn't make sense. It is not accessible to residents to understand. It's very hard to hold an entity accountable where the data is incomprehensible. So thank you so much, Chair, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Now we'll proceed to our pre-panel. And we'll call up the first, Tanisha Grant, Layla Law-Grisco, Manny Martinez, and Zula Velasquez. Please approach. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Grant, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chair Banks and members of the City Council Public Housing Committee. My name is Tanisha Grant, Executive Director of Parent Support in Parents New York, and I'm a community leader. I am pleased to offer testimony today on NYCHA transfers and vacancies. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the public housing administrators present their testimony. In my extensive experience with these meetings, it is discouraging when those responsible for serving the public do not remain to hear our perspectives. As previously stated, I am a public servant, and my community-based organization collaborates with numerous partners. One key partner is a resident-led organization dedicated to preserving public housing and advocating for its continued availability. The majority of its members are public housing tenants or tenant association presidents. Residents to Preserve Public Housing has been doing this work for 7 years now. In my testimony today, I represent not only myself and my community, but also the residents advocating for the preservation of public housing. To be clear, Chair, tenant transfers and vacancies are highly disorganized in their support of our public housing residents. For example, consider a resident, a Black mother who has lived in Section 9 apartments for 35 years and raised 5 children there. This apartment is located on the 5th floor of a 5-story walk-up. A resident requires a medical transfer to a lower floor, and requestings are pending for over 10 years. Despite first-floor vacancies, NYCHA administration has been prioritizing tenants enrolled in those RAD and PAC Section 8 programs, delaying the necessary accommodation that she needs. Another resident disabled for years is confined to the 19th floor due to the persistent elevator outages. She reports frequent instances of NYCHA administrators providing false information. These necessities are immediate, so serious oversight of all NYCHA operations is in order. The RAD and PAC project should be suspended until all transfers, including medically necessary transfers, are completed and all vacant apartments are filled with Section 9 tenants. Our Section 9 tenants are being pushed out, Chair. They are being pushed out of their homes where they have raised generations of their children under the disguise of home improvement. I can tell you that a lot of these repairs, these so-called repairs that they have done to NYCHA apartments, months later are coming undone because they were done as cheaply as possible. This isn't right. In the past couple of years, Black folks have been the #1 population to leave the city due to an affordability issue. We have seen the highest eviction rates happening to our NYCHA tenants since these conversions started to take place. These private management companies are not doing their job in a timely and effective manner, but they are quick to serve our tenants eviction letters. The PAC conversions are hindering the Section 9 residents who have transfers in for years. NYCHA took the rights away from the property management office to do transfers. Property management offices are telling residents who have approved medical transfers that they do not handle transfers and that they must call downtown. This is a direct attack on our public housing residents, and we will not stand for it. These conversions were supposed to improve our NYCHA residents' quality of life. Instead, it has caused extreme mental illness and more health issues. There should be nothing done without the tenants' full knowledge and cooperation. I'm almost done. This is not what is happening. The lived experience experts here are the tenants, not the NYCHA administrators. Our residents deserve accountability and respect, and we intend to save Section 9 for any tenant who wants to keep their public housing. We also intend to keep fighting for real public permanent upgrades to Section 9 residents' apartments. Residents should never have to live in low-quality, harmful NYCHA apartments. We request full funding for NYCHA in the fiscal year 2026 budget. We also approve these bills, which our city council members are sponsoring. We hope that this will provide much transparency and accountability to what is really happening at NYCHA. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Banks and members of the committee. My name is Leila Logiziko, and I'm testifying today in my capacity as community advocate and district leader for Assembly District 75, Part A. I would like to raise several serious concerns regarding the practices at Fulton and Elliott Chelsea regarding vacancies. The first one is a discrepancy in unit count. The initial RFP that was issued for FEC redevelopment explicitly referenced 2,073 residential units. However, recent official documentation, including the draft environmental impact statement, now refers to 2,056 units. So it sounds like 17 apartments have evaporated from 2021 to today. There has been no public explanation for this reduction. The disappearance of these units from the plan raises important questions about transparency, project scope, and affordability commitments. The public and current residents obviously deserve a full accounting of this change. On the question of warehousing of units for transfer purposes, NYCHA and Related, the developer selected for this project, have admitted on multiple occasions, including in public meetings and in communication with stakeholders, that they are intentionally warehousing units within FEC development. The stated purpose is to facilitate further tenant transfer from the senior building at Fulton houses, the senior building at Chelsea Addition houses, and Building 11 at Fulton, both of which are scheduled for early demolition were this redevelopment plan to be approved. This practice raises deep ethical and procedural questions. Warehousing rent-stabilized public housing units, particularly amid a citywide housing crisis and record wait list, represents a significant disservice to families awaiting placement and undermines the mission of public housing. The exact number of these warehoused units is actually not known or not recorded anywhere. Furthermore, third point, the lack of documentation and accountability. There is no comprehensive documentation available to the public that details the total number of warehouse units, the duration for which they have been warehoused, the criteria used to select units for warehousing, the duration of vacancy, as well as any oversight mechanism in place. NYCHA's opacity on this matter creates an accountability vacuum. Residents, advocates, and elected officials are unable to verify how many units are being kept off the rolls and for how long. This is really a problem, and we urge this committee to actually really get accountability from NYCHA. Finally, something that is really rubbing lots of tenants the wrong way. The use of a NYCHA unit for a private consultant. It has come to light that one residential unit at Fulton Houses has been allocated to HOU, which is a private relocation consultant contracted by the developer. This unit is reportedly being used as an office for HOU staff, where they also see tenants. This represents a diversion of a public housing unit intending to house low-income New Yorkers to a private entity for administrative purposes. Again, we're talking really about one unit, but it is really rubbing tenants the wrong way. This raises serious concern about priorities, misuse of precious housing resources, and deserves to be addressed. In conclusion, at a time where tens of thousands of families are on the NYCHA waiting list, every public housing unit matters. The practice of warehousing units without transparency, the unexplained reduction in proposed units, and if I can just get 10 more
30
seconds,
seconds.
The allocation of apartments for private consultants must be scrutinized. I thank you very much for holding this hearing and stand ready to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Martinez.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Chair Banks and the Public Housing Committee, as well as Mr. Brennan. Good morning, Chair Banks. Picture a river of money. Billions of federal dollars rushing through the New York City's public housing every single year. 95% of those apartments are still lived in, cooked in, studied in, dreamed in, kids doing homework at the kitchen table, grandmothers cooking on a battered stove. That's NYCHA's heartbeat. But somewhere in the skyscraper boardrooms, that heartbeat has been considered an obstacle to accessing trillions in collective property values and the demographic shifts that come with gentrification. NYCHA's executives are bending over backwards for private management firms, smoothing the path to conversions that slice away residents' protections like a hot knife through butter. They call it modernization. We see eviction and displacement, because when privatization walks in the front door, economic rights slip out the back. This high rate of vacancy is due to their preparation of conversions to RAD, because at a specific percentage, it is profitable for the private property management company to circumvent the $15,000 worth of a move out by just having empty apartments. Look at those 7,700 empty apartments. They could be training grounds, Section 3 opportunities where residents pick up wrenches, clipboards, and payroll checks. Instead, NYCHA imposes contract thresholds apparently not relevant in regulations to public housing, restricting training, employment, and contracting as required under our residents' economic rights. The law says opportunity, the practice screams exclusion. And who bears the cost? Survivors of domestic violence waiting years for a safe transfer, wheelchair users stranded in fourth-floor walk-ups, New Yorkers sleeping on couches while 7,700 kitchens gather dust, all while executives polish talking points about economic mobility, about looking for the residents' best interest, but all of that is just impotent nonsense, which never reaches any meaningful results. Let's speak plain. If public housing were mostly white, would this hollowing out be tolerated? Will HUD's field office look the other way while redlining is camouflaged in a blue highlighter? Because this practice has persisted since our economic rights became law decades ago, truly more than 7 years ago. Use those vacant units for Section 3 jobs, for resident-owned contracts under $1 million, for apprenticeships that turn broken radiators into working resumes. That is the mission NYCHA trumpets only when asked, economic mobility, but it's just camouflage. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for the benefit that is demanded in our rights for those units to be used for our benefit to spur economic mobility through Section 3, and also for our community's dignity and integrity to be restored. We see these empty apartments that become provocations of high crime rates, where people are breaking into these apartments and using them for crack houses and prostitution. We need safety. We need our economic mobility. We need our rights. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is Zule Velasquez? Thank you. You can approach the panel table. Thank you for being part of the pre-panel. We have to maintain order, ma'am. Thank you. You may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So at Jacob Reese, it appears to be that we have vacant apartments, but one of the things that I've noticed during my canvassing against the privatization, and among other things, is that they're holding these apartments for, let's say, for instance, a couple months ago, they did the Section 8, they opened up Section 8. So instead of HUD, it appeared to be that NYCHA led that initiative. And instead of HUD approving or disapproving the residents, they got letters from NYCHA saying that they accepted applicants based on ransom versus priority, date, post date, etc. And only when those residents, those candidates who submitted their application qualified, it was when, I guess, they got an approval. But anyone who was in the house component that didn't qualify, they said they just didn't qualify. Sometimes they were actually pre-screening the wrong resident, right? So let's say, for instance, my daughter fits the criteria, didn't get approved because of the parent that was the head of household. So what I believe is happening is that they are taking from a list, right? But the new list they created. That's why the backlog for the actual Section 9 people is still what it is, and it hasn't moved, because they are basically privatizing within. So let's say, for instance, Jacob Reese. If they take all these Section 8 people, empty apartments, and they replace them with Section 8, then it's majority Section 8, not Section 9. So I think that's just the tactic that they're doing. And it's unfortunate. In regards to the turnover for the repairs, it is costly, but if they replaced all our piping and gas lines, then it would basically limit the quick, like they say, fix, right? This way the apartments will last longer, because they could patch up the work, but between the roof work that is or isn't done, has holes, or the pointing that wasn't done properly and they didn't follow through with, if they did things a little differently, it would be fine. But if you take one apartment that has a problem with a piece of pipe and you just cut that piece, it's not gonna help the rest of the problem, right? It's just gonna continue to surface. At Jacob Reese, it apparently appears that our piping and gas lines have never been replaced in the 75 years plus that we exist. And again, in the developments, if they replace the piping before this, before their attempt to do it when the privatization, then the apartments will last a little longer. When breaking the pipes or doing any construction, they should consider doing, giving the residents proper air monitors and proper clean water so we won't get contaminated. At Reese, there was residents who died and also had arsenic poisoning from I would say, over 30 residents have proof from different laboratories. And it's just some of the stuff, including this black mold that this lady mentioned. People are getting seizures. One of my residents, seizures to her children. One has brain damage. So if they replace the pipes, all the pipes, throughout all the lines, this type of stuff will stop. And the apartments will be more, obviously, available.
Thank you for your testimony. We have an additional pre-panel member that's gonna. You may approach. Mrs. Glover? Thank you. And you have 4 minutes, Ms. Glover, like everybody else, so you don't have to rush.
Mr. Banks, that's so sweet of you, because you didn't have to do that. I appreciate that. Good morning, Mr. Banks and the Public Housing Committee. My name is Crystal Glover, and I want justice. Before I get to the vacancies and all that stuff, I want to talk about this. Almost 2 years ago, Adeline Carrion, who was a vice president at Washington Houses, had me falsely arrested. Washington Houses didn't have running water at that time. Management allowed the resident council to give water out, but they shouldn't have. When I went to reach for the water, Adeline, which is known as Ada, said, "I'm sick of her." She jumped on my back. That evening, I called the police to report the incident because my back started hurting. They came. While I got into the ambulance, Adeline was walking by with her dog. I told the officer, "There she go, right there." 2 cops went over to her. They took a long time. The ambulance took me to the neighborhood hospital, and while the nurse was triaging me, which means taking my vitals, a bunch of cops from the 23rd Precinct and PSA 5 surrounded me. I asked them, "What's going on?" A female cop said, "She said you scratched her and she's getting a lawyer." I pleaded with the cop. "No, you got it wrong. They shackled me. They handcuffed me." I sat there for 2 hours waiting to see a doctor about my back. And when the doc was done, the cops took me to the PSA 5, took my picture, then put me in a bullpen with a pissy woman laid out. Thank God my family were there waiting for me to be released. I had to go to criminal court. The first time I went, the lawyer told me, "Plead guilty. We can do the paperwork and have you out here in no time." I said, "I will never plead guilty to something I didn't do." After 90 days, the court sealed the case. I had to go through the legal department of New York City Housing Authority. I testified, told the truth, and the case was dismissed. Because of the hate of Adeline Carrion, who lives at Washington Houses, and who was the former vice president, I could have lost my lease. Adeline and I never had any negative encounters. We just lived in the same development. Just as sure as there's a God, I gave this woman no reason to hate me. I want NYCHA to reprimand her. She should not be allowed to get away with this. This whole incident has caused me much stress, physically and psychologically. As for vacant apartments, I wouldn't recommend anybody trying to move into New York City Housing Authority. The resident council at Washington Houses is supposed to be the voice for the tenants. All New York City Housing Authority, New York City Housing resident associations, better known as tenant associations, are the voice. They gather information, they can meet with the management. Okay, let me get back to my paper. Okay. The resident councils is supposed to be the voice for tenants, legally and in accordance with 964 HUD regulations. Washington Houses hasn't had a tenant meeting in 9 months. Since my getting falsely arrested at New York City Housing Authority grounds and the case being dismissed, we have had 3 managers. The management office is not safe. There is severe contracting work going on. The manager is supposed to meet with the resident council monthly for monthly meetings, not happening. In my building, elevator A car has been broken working for 2 years. I've been stuck in it at least 3 minutes. The authority is going to wait until
30
someone
seconds to wrap
dies
it up.
in it in that elevator before they terminate it altogether. NYCHA is unethical and immoral. I've spoken to the Vice President of PHO, Manhattan Property Management, EVP for President Services, Partnership and Initiatives, Office of the EVP, Vice President of Resident Services, Community Engagement and Partnership about the safety of Washington houses. None of them have followed through, and like I said, if anything happens to me or my family, New York City Housing Authority is to blame. There is no safety, no security, nothing posted about PSA 5 meetings for the residents, the tenant associations. It's a free-for-all. It's a mess. And I want you to know, Sir Banks, it's the tenants that have the power. They don't read and they don't know. It takes 720 months before you can even apply. How I know for vacancy? How I know that's because I read it online. I thank you for allowing me to sit on this first panel. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I will move to our virtual pre-panel. We will have Ms. Spears.
You may begin.
Hi, can you hear and see me?
We can hear you, and we can see your background.
Okay.
Now we can see you.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Banks and other esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this unique pre-panel. My name is NYCHA Spears. I'm a longtime resident of NYCHA and native New Yorker, born and raised in Gun Hill houses. I'm also a member of Save Section 9, a grassroots organization and tenant-led coalition that works to educate and activate public housing tenants. The testimony I'm about to provide was also forwarded to each of your district offices via email on May 23rd and May 27th, and I pray that my direct appeal today will garner an immediate response. I'm seeking assistance with an issue related to being transferred into a right-sized unit with a reasonable accommodation request at the recently RAD Pack converted Boston Secor houses, which is being managed by Wavecrest Management in the Bronx, New York, and is now subsidized through project-based Section 8 as of October 2024. My teenage son and I have been waiting to be transferred into a 2-bedroom apartment for over a decade, with the most recent transfer approval being issued in 2019. In August 2024, I received a letter from NYCHA's leased housing department stating my intra-developmental transfer was closed due to Boston Secor's privatization under RAD Pact. I was advised to contact Wavecrest Management to initiate a new transfer request. An initial phone conversation with Leased Housing Department's Director Robert Tesario on September 24th noted that to be considered for a transfer, I would need to sign the new RAD Pack lease to obtain a tenant-based Section 8 voucher. I obtained legal representation to advocate for me to receive the voucher in advance of the 10-month conversion rule. The lawyer advised me that the issuance of a voucher was the only remedy to resolve my transfer request, although I asked to be placed in another Section 9 funded NYCHA apartment. Residing on the top floor of a building with constant elevator outages and living with a permanent partial disability has been hard. As a recent brain surgery survivor, concerns of exposure to construction dust, lead, and asbestos-contaminated debris presented themselves, and it was important to minimize my exposure to environmental toxins. I was told by NYCHA staff over the summer of 2024 that all transfers to other NYCHA developments and within Boston Secor were frozen. My right to be transferred out of my apartment was taken away from me due to RAD Pact, which I never wished to be a part of. I later found out that I was expecting my second child, who was born in March 2025. This made the need for a right-sized apartment more urgent. Unfortunately, throughout my entire pregnancy, I was subjected to the toxic conditions that I tried to avoid, which resulted in headaches, nausea, nosebleed, and high blood pressure. My newborn is now being exposed to the same toxic environment, with active demolition work being conducted as I speak to you all. Although I received the portable voucher in November 2024 and have vigorously sought housing in New York City, I haven't been able to find an apartment. I'm unable to port my voucher out to another New York county through the NYCHA portal, and a phone call to NYCHA's Customer Contact Center on June 10th confirmed that my transfer voucher was closed on May 25th, although Mr. Tesario stated in an email on April 25th that he personally extended it to July 24th, 2025. Wavecrest Management's property manager, Benjamin DeLeon has told me that there are no vacancies within Boston Secor. However, on April 25th, I was relocated into a fully renovated 2-bedroom apartment within my same building as my 1-bedroom apartment was renovated. I have inquired about leasing the apartment and was told by lead housing assistant Carmen Alvarez that transfers are not being done at Boston Secor until the conversion is complete. This will be no earlier than the year 2027. I'm essentially being forced to return to an inadequately sized unit relative to my household size of 3. Being in a wrong size apartment will create hoarder-like conditions for my household, and as a person with a disability, my reasonable accommodation request is being ignored. Wavecrest Management is holding vacant units at
30
hospitality
seconds.
suites, which is unfair to tenants like myself who are approved for a transfer under a reasonable accommodation before this contract between NYCHA and real estate entities was signed. I am now being threatened and retaliated against by Wavecrest Management with holdover proceedings, which is contributing to my postpartum anxiety and depression. I would appreciate an opportunity to discuss my issues further and obtain assistance or advocacy in helping me remain in the 2-bedroom apartment that I'm entitled to. I sincerely thank you all for the opportunity to share my concerns as I represent many tenants who are being subjected to similar unethical and potentially illegal practices. Your attention to this urgent matter as I try to obtain adequate housing for my son and daughter are greatly appreciated. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. To the panel, thank you so much. We've been joined by Councilmember Botcher and Councilmember Brennan. We'll now proceed to the administration. You may approach.
Good morning. If you both could raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Yes.
Thank you. And before you begin, if you could identify your name and your title for the record, that would be great. Thank you.
Eva Trimble, Chief Operating Officer, NYCHA.
Sylvia Audi, Senior Vice President for Public Housing Tenancy Administration.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Chair Chris Banks, members of the Committee on Public Housing, other distinguished members of the City Council, NYCHA residents, community advocates, and members of the public, good morning. I am Eva Trimble, NYCHA's Chief Operating Officer. I am pleased to be joined today by Sylvia Audi, Senior Vice President of Public Housing Tenancy Administration, and other members of the NYCHA team. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss vacancies and transfers at the authority. NYCHA is a vital resource of affordable housing, and we strive to ensure that as many New Yorkers as possible can benefit from safe and decent public housing. As part of our efforts to improve residents' quality of life, and in compliance with the HUD agreement, we have been performing extensive and required environmental work in every apartment that becomes unoccupied. Considering the massive repair needs across the authority, nearly $80 billion, and the average tenure in a NYCHA apartment, 25 years, this is a vital opportunity to carry out critical health and safety work. Lead-based paint testing and abatement is a major element of the work we're doing in vacant apartments. NYCHA's policy is that when an apartment becomes vacant, our Healthy Homes team conducts a lead-based paint inspection if the apartment hasn't already been inspected prior to becoming vacant. If lead-based paint is identified, the apartment is scheduled for abatement. An asbestos investigation is performed as well at apartments with damaged tiles or textured ceilings. Since the city instituted a more stringent lead paint standard in December 2021, Healthy Homes has cleared lead-based paint in more than 16,000 apartments at turnover. We are currently clearing vacant apartments for lead-based paint at a rate of 325 apartments per month. For vinyl asbestos floor tiles, we abate around 160 to 200 vacant apartments each month. Since December 2021, we have abated asbestos floor tiles in more than 7,500 vacant apartments. On average, it takes 4 to 6 months to complete lead and asbestos testing and abatement if necessary during turnover. It costs approximately $17,000 to complete lead testing, abatement, and clearance in each apartment, and approximately $25,000 to complete asbestos testing, abatement, and clearance in each apartment. While the practice of eliminating lead-based paint adds time to the apartment turnover process, it also means that every resident will move into a new apartment that is free of this environmental hazard. Our work in this area is transformative, an accomplishment that addresses a long-entrenched issue and dramatically benefits residents. Since last June, NYCHA has been turning over approximately 535 apartments per month. Each development is expected to complete a minimum of 5 move-outs per month. While we are always working to turn over apartments as quickly as possible and to speed up our timelines, we take pride in the significantly increased turnover activity and the fact that residents are moving into safe and rehabilitated homes. We also understand that it's frustrating to wait for a new apartment. To reduce the wait times for families, we now match prospective tenants with apartments when the homes are turnkey ready, rather than once the apartment is vacated per previous policy. NYCHA's vacancy rate is currently 4.46%, which is lower than the national public housing vacancy rate of 5.2%. Additionally, the total number of move-ins in 2024 was 52% higher than 2023. NYCHA works with partners at all levels of government to use every available resource to get New Yorkers into our deeply affordable apartments. We are grateful for the city's ongoing support, including via funding for the Vacant Unit Readiness Program. In the current fiscal year, the city has made approximately $76 million available to NYCHA for this program for rehabilitation work associated with expediting apartment turnover. Additional funding is also available for the following years. I'd like to take a moment to share some exciting updates about our Tenant Selection and Assignment Plan, TSAP. For nearly 30 years, TSAP has guided a fair and neutral process for filling vacancies with applicants and tenant transfers. We evaluate our transfer policies periodically to ensure that we are serving residents and applicants as efficiently and effectively as possible, while adhering to applicable laws, regulations, and requirements. In line with our vision for transformation, we are considering changing the current TSAP from a 4-tier to a 3-tier system. Tiers 1 and 2 are allocated to tenant relocations. The 3rd tier encompasses all remaining transfer and applicant selections, which would be divided into 7 rotating groups, with certain categories allocated a higher proportion of selections to reflect their priority. The revised rotation model will ensure a more balanced and efficient selection process while addressing the needs of multiple housing priorities, including health and safety matters, domestic violence, reasonable accommodations, and homelessness. We are currently seeking feedback from stakeholders, including resident leadership and elected officials, on the proposed transfer policy changes, and we have already briefed Chair Banks and Assemblymember Rosenthal, as well as other partners and housing advocates, as part of a robust outreach campaign. The changes are also described in the draft fiscal year 2026 annual plan that was released for public review this past Friday, June 13th. Residents and any member of the public can comment on the plan, including the proposed TSAP changes, in person or virtually at a July 30th public hearing. Comments can also be submitted via email. The annual plan, as well as details about the public hearing and commenting process, are available on NYCHA's website. We aim to provide housing to New Yorkers as quickly as possible while ensuring that they are moving into safe and decent homes, which have been remediated of hazards like lead and asbestos. The strides we are making in carrying out critical work like lead and abatement are benefiting residents today as well as generations to come. We acknowledge that there is more work to be done, and we are always grateful to collaborate with the Council and other partners on ways we can improve our services to residents and continue making progress as an organization. Thank you. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your opening statement. We will begin in relation to reporting on vacant public housing dwelling units. Want to know how many vacant units are NYCHA's portfolio as of right now, and particularly NYCHA lists 4 categories of units available for occupancy, temporarily off rent roll and permanently off rent roll, and match to prospective tenants. Can you provide a clear definition of each category and the current number of vacant units in each category?
Thank you, Council Member. The number of vacant available units right now, as of June 1st, is 5,969. Vacant available apartments are apartments that have had residents move out and are at some point in our turnover or leasing process. Our temporarily off the rent roll units as of June 1st are 1,712. Temporarily off the rent roll is a category we use to take apartments that need to be on hold and will not be turned over right away. Some of the examples of a temporary off the rent roll hold are apartments that we're holding for relocations as part of our comprehensive modernization programs, including Comp Mod and the Trust program. We also take apartments temporarily off the rent roll if they're severely damaged and we know that they'll need additional work. Permanently off the rent roll is 1,797, and we take apartments permanently off the rent roll in anticipation of conversions to the PACT program. And again, those apartments will be used to facilitate relocations as part of the construction work that the PACT developers do on properties. We also take apartments permanently off the rent roll if they're going to no longer be used for residential purposes, but for community purposes, such as resident association offices or other community or management needs. In addition, we have just over 809 units matched to prospective tenants. So those are part of the vacant available units, but they are in the lease-up process as we speak.
Okay. And on average, how long do such units remain vacant?
And so we've been working really hard to reduce that time frame. Right now, overall, the prep time for a vacant unit is 352 days, and that's compared to 456 days last year. So we've created a reduction of 23% through our efforts to streamline this process. We are working hard to reduce that backlog of vacant available units.
And I believe, I don't know if you answered this question, but what reasons that a unit would be moved from permanently off rent roll?
So for permanent off rent roll, we primarily use that for PACT properties in order to preserve those units to facilitate on-site relocations for residents so that their lives are not disrupted during the construction process.
And then what is the average of time between when a vacant unit is occupied by a prospective tenant and when the tenant moves in?
Right now, we're seeing an average time of 352 days. And again, that's a 23% reduction from last year.
Okay. Does NYCHA's count of vacant units include units that are currently occupied by squatters?
No. Well, let me rephrase that. If right now those vacant available units are listed as vacant, if they, depending on squatter, if somebody breaks into an apartment that may be listed as vacant, and as soon as we know about that, we work closely with the NYPD to reclaim that unit.
So do you have a breakdown of the different type of squatters?
I don't have a breakdown right now. There are instances where apartments are broken into and people are staying in them illegally.
I
don't have a total count of squatters.
Well, how often does NYCHA check these vacant units for unauthorized persons?
We ask that we don't actively are checking for unauthorized. However, our staff are in the buildings every day, and residents are usually aware of what's going on. And so as soon as we are told about an apartment that may have a squatter in it, we work closely with our law department and the NYPD's reclamation unit. Since the start of the reclamation unit, we've reclaimed over 300 units through our partnership with NYPD.
How do you attain that information?
Either from residents or from our staff observing activity in an apartment.
So there's no information that comes in, from a tenant or from, you know, anybody who's in that particular building, how is that information then gathered? Is management door knocking? Is there any proactive measures taken by the management to make sure that that particular apartment is secured?
We're not proactively going to each vacant unit, however.
And why is that?
What's that?
Why is that?
Well, our staff are working on the vacant unit, so there's different people in and out of those units at different times. So as soon as an apartment becomes vacant, it opens the move-out work ticket, and then the lead and asbestos work is triggered. So we have different staff in and out of those units already, and if those staff identify activity within the unit, which does sometimes happen, then we will respond.
But I mean, if somebody's breaking into an apartment, or they broke into an apartment, and there's staff in and out, would that staff not know that
yes,
there's a squatter in the apartment?
That's one of the instances where the staff tell us, yes.
And those apartments where there are no activities, or where there's no staff in and out, how are you accounting to make sure that that apartment is still secure?
There are definitely some instances, I'm sure, where we're missing people are breaking into the apartments, but between caretakers in the building every day, the skilled trade and healthy home staff that are working on the vacants, and we are beginning to do annual inspections of our vacant apartments, just like we do our occupied starting this year. So we do hope to be able to catch those situations of squatters more quickly.
And if legal action is taken to remove a squatter, what is the average length of time before an apartment can be made available again for authorized residents?
It's the same as a regular vacant apartment. 352 days is our average turnover time right now.
Okay, and the bill, this particular bill that's being introduced by Council Member Velez, the bill would require reporting of all units that are vacant for more than 30 continuous days. What are the reasons that a unit might remain vacant for more than 30 days?
Every single vacant unit is vacant for more than 30 days because of the required environmental work that we do. So the lead and asbestos testing alone takes 4 to 6 months. The lead and asbestos testing and abatement, rather, takes 4 to 6 months. So every unit will be vacant for more than 30 days in order to do that required work.
Well, how does NYCHA currently report on its vacant units or share information about the vacant units with the public?
NYCHA publishes vacant unit data on our website under our metrics page, and that information is updated monthly.
And is there any direct reporting or information given to maybe the tenant association or the resident association?
If a resident association asks for vacant unit information, we can share that with them.
How often does NYCHA update its records relating to vacant units? And would a more frequent reporting scheme, for example, monthly, be more useful?
So NYCHA's our internal information on vacant units is in real time as we're processing move-outs and transfers and work on work tickets. So NYCHA internally has real-time day-to-day information. We publish it monthly on our website.
And if another agency or office were to be tasked with preparing a report on vacancies, would NYCHA commit to sharing the necessary information with the agency or office?
We already share information monthly on our website.
But we're talking about directly with an agency.
We're open to considering other alternatives with the council. We're happy to talk to you more about that.
And I just want to let you know, as far as the securing of the vacant apartments, obviously it's definitely of concern when there is a apartment that is vacant. And we've heard from multiple tenants throughout NYCHA, and particularly in my district, that the issue is NYCHA's lack or its inability to secure those apartments. And that has created a public safety issue for the residents in that building, and that to me is unacceptable. How NYCHA or its lack thereof commitment to secure those apartments. So I just want to reiterate that.
So I just want to flag that when an apartment becomes vacant and the keys are turned in and we create that move-out work order to start the work on that vacant available unit, we change the locks. So we put in a different cylinder. NYCHA has those keys that facilitates the workmen coming in and out, the trades, the healthy homes. If a resident sees that that apartment has been broken into, the sooner that they notify us, the better, so that we can work with NYPD to reclaim it and change the locks again.
Thank you. In relation to Councilmember Ayala's bill, well, I guess before I go to Councilmember Ayala's bill, we'll allow Councilmember Velez to ask her questions.
Councilmember, may I just correct the record on one thing in my testimony, which was prepared prior to this? We did offer Assemblymember Rosenthal a briefing, but she was not able to make it due to a scheduling conflict. So I just wanted to correct that we did not actually end up briefing her, as I said in my testimony.
Thank you for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you repeat the number of units that are permanently off the roll?
Yes. We have permanently off the rent roll 1,797.
Got it. So in terms of total, from the vacants available, the temporaries, the permanents, and then the matched, we're looking upwards of maybe 8,000 units?
Yes.
Okay. So NYCHA was originally founded with the mission in part to address families overcrowding in tenement housing. How is NYCHA currently addressing overcrowding conditions now being experienced by resident families in the buildings?
Thank you for the question. So we have priorities in our current tenant selection and assignment plan for overcrowding and extreme overcrowding. So tenants are welcome to submit a transfer for either of those reasons. We also right-size families upon relocation. So if we are relocating them for any emergency work or any modernization work, they are being placed in the right-size apartment.
So how many units do you currently have tagged as overcrowded and extremely overcrowded, since you made the distinction?
I don't have the exact number of families that are currently experiencing overcrowding and extremely overcrowding, but we can get that for you.
Okay, but you do track it?
Yes.
Okay, yes, we'd love to see that citywide and disaggregated by development. NYCHA, like all landlords, is required by federal, state, and city housing laws to not discriminate and provide equal housing opportunities for all qualified applicants, transferees, and residents. Residents with disabilities are protected by these fair housing laws as well. How is NYCHA addressing reasonable accommodation transfer requested by disabled households?
So we also have a series of priorities within the TSAP for reasonable accommodations that cover a variety of reasonable accommodation types, accessible units, extra bedrooms, lower floors. And so we have, we have several tenants that have requested those transfers. We have over 6,500 that are waiting for an accessible unit.
Excuse me, how many?
Over 6,500
Waiting?
for an accessible
Waiting
unit.
for an accessible unit. Got it. Chair,
You
thank
may.
you, Chair. During the last hearing on this bill, NYCHA noted that many aspects of Intro 111 are already being reported on, as Ms. Kimball just noted. Can you inform us specifically which elements are already being reported on and in what format?
On our metrics page now, we report on the number of vacant available units, the matched units, and the off-rent roll units.
And are those disaggregated by development, or is it just one, we have 5,000 units
It's
and
just
that's
the
it?
total.
Okay. So relatively useless if I'm specifically interested in what's happening in Red Hook.
We are always happy to send you
You can
that
respond to me,
information.
but in terms of a Red Hook resident wanting to know, seeing multitude of vacant apartments, there is no way for them to go onto the website to see how many units are in fact empty in Red Hook houses.
If a resident needs a transfer, they can work with their property management office or apply online for a transfer, and they will have the choice of looking for a borough-wide wait list or a development wait list. But the number of units within Red Hook, it frankly changes and wouldn't matter
Sure.
to their transfer process.
Sure, it changes, but my point is there's no way for a resident to see how many cumulative apartments are available and vacant in various stages on the website. So that's just my point. The component of this legislation that seems incredibly important here is a requirement to report on the why the unit is available. Is this piece of information you're providing to the public in any form?
No, it's also not a piece of information that we track easily. It's burdensome for us to track and document the reasons for every vacancy, as there can be many reasons for vacancies.
How many reasons beyond? Actually, let's talk about what are the major reasons that, I mean, you could do infinity lists, but I'm sure there are like a small classification that you can use to give a better understanding about why the units, and NYCHA has also claimed a good number of them are for lead and abatement purposes. What are some of the reasons you're seeing the units are vacant?
If an apartment is vacant an apartment isn't vacated for lead unless we're taking it offline for a permanent reason. We do temporary relocations to hotels to facilitate our lead and asbestos work in order to remove the family while we're doing that hazardous abatement. However, the reasons for apartments to be vacated permanently are numerous, and it's not something that we have the ability to track on an ongoing way.
So does NYCHA have well, maybe no, but does NYCHA have an understanding of the status of its apartments when it's vacant? Like, you don't know why some apartments are vacant currently?
A resident is also not required to give us a reason. If they want to move out and they process their move out and they turn in their keys, they don't have to give a reason. Mm-hmm. The housing assistant may know of the reason for the move out. They may talk to the resident and know. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are some that we know if there's a deceased tenant, if someone is transferring outside of NYCHA.
So I think we're misconstruing something. It's not why the tenant is leaving. It is why NYCHA is holding this apartment vacant. That is what we are inquiring about. And I would imagine there would be some assessment when you understand a unit is vacant around why you would hold a unit and not flip it. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay, I understand what you're asking now. I'm sorry, I did not understand the question. I thought you were asking the reasons for a tenant leaving
not
an
for the
apartment.
tenants, for why NYCHA has this in its custody and is subsequently holding on to it for very long periods of time.
So for our off-rent roll code, our off-rent roll process, and why we're holding apartments outside the vacant available universe are the universe of apartments that have been vacated by residents and we are in the process of turning. For temporary and permanent off the rent roll, we actually have to list those with codes that we submit to HUD. And so there's very specific reasons why we would take an apartment permanently or temporarily off the rent roll. Permanently off the rent roll, the majority of those units are being held in anticipation of the PACT and or soon-to-be trust conversions in order to facilitate relocations. Temporary off the rent roll, also a significant number, is to be held for modernization, both the trust and our comprehensive modernization programs, again, to facilitate on-site or nearby relocations of residents during major modernization construction efforts. So those are the primary reasons for apartments being held off the rent roll. In addition, temporary off the rent roll can include things such as fire damaged units that require more extensive work. There are some apartments being held off for other reasons such as hospitality in order to facilitate other types of transfers. And in the permanent status, as I mentioned, we hold apartments off the rent roll that are no longer going to be used for residential purposes in order to facilitate space for resident association leaders or other community needs.
Great. So I think you have the large categories of why you're holding them, and then you have the subcategories. Our point here is for greater transparency and understanding what is happening, NYCHA could provide more information rather than aggregate numbers. So at the end of 2022, the vacant units at Red Hook East and West stood at 92. Currently, Red Hook East and West have 285 vacant apartments, which is approximately 1 in 10 apartments. What accounts for this exponential increase? And I was actually quite alarmed. I have all the vacancies here, and Red Hook East and West clearly outsized number of vacant units, in addition to a whole host of the other categories. So what accounts for this incredible, disturbing number of apartments that are vacant?
So Red Hook East and West, we were holding units available for relocation as associated with the comprehensive modernization projects happening at Gowanus and Wyckoff nearby. Again, we wanted to ensure that we can relocate residents, if needed, into apartments in their communities or nearby so that they're closer to schools, doctor's appointments, whatever they need in their support.
But meanwhile, we have 124 people on transfer list from Red Hook East and West. 59 families for overcrowded, 34 families for domestic violence, 31 families for needing a unit that can accommodate their disability. How do you square holding apartment units for other people of a different neighborhood, holding 285 apartments vacant, and then telling the Red Hook residents who need transfers that are 124 that are sitting there waiting over a year? Like, how do we square that?
I also want to flag that in addition to those Red Hook residents that you're flagging, we have over 14,000 prospective tenants and residents on the current wait list. So the certified applicants and approved transfers waiting to be matched is 14,000. So it's not necessarily again about those residents in Red Hook. It's about the full list. I'm not sure where those residents
which makes it
on.
even more egregious. Why are we sitting on several hundred empty apartments?
In order for us to do the comprehensive modernization work that is so needed for these developments, to address the underlying conditions, as the resident from Reese mentioned, that it's time to do the pipes, it's time to do the gas risers. In order to do that work, there is no way to get it done efficiently without relocations. So this is a trade-off that we have to make between competing housing priorities in order to improve our desperate housing stock and make those projects work, and the needs of residents waiting for transfers.
So
There's just simply not enough vacancies to do everything.
So for the record, I just want to say two things. I understand we are holding the whole in the citywide, and clearly the numbers become more egregious as we move up the citywide ladder. However, for the residents of Red Hook, who are sitting there waiting for apartments when there is a double amount of apartments available, waiting to accommodate rad-packed in another development, it's not okay.
They're not waiting for rad-packed.
Whatever it is they're waiting for, there are apartments there in their home that they could move into, and waiting for to accommodate other developments, because NYCHA is prioritizing other developments. Everybody deserves it, but I'm saying I represent Red Hook residents, so I just need to state that for the record. We need to make sure that people are transferred and held safely. And waiting for other developments to do their thing, honestly, nice, but I'm sure we can find more solutions. The last thing I just want to say for the record, this council fought very hard. The mayor repeatedly defunded the vacant readiness unit. And this council has put in those resources over and over again. And even when we put those resources in, it seems like the mayor wants to pillage it and use it for other things. We need to get, if we are serious about a housing crisis, the capital dollars that we seem to be sending all around the city for all these random projects, we should make sure that all those 8,000 units are online, and if they take 6 months to turn over for lead, since that's the majority of them, we should have them all online very soon. So I just want to say, this council's committed to getting these units online, and I appreciate the effort. I know you have been working hard to get them back online, but it feels like the city as an apparatus is not serious about this, and we need to get serious if we want to address housing rather than ramming luxury development units in every space we can. Thank you.
Councilmember Vilas, I just want to correct the record on the reasonable accommodations. We have 1,700 families waiting for reasonable accommodation transfer, and of those, 442 are for accessible apartments. The 6,500 was total applicants. I apologize.
Are you finished, Councilmember? You good? Well, we'll have an opportunity to have those questions asked. We're going to now step away from vacancies and transfers, and this is pointed towards Councilman Viola's bill in relation to requiring NYPD to make crime stats at each NYCHA-operated housing development available through the NYPD's website, as well as making other crime information regarding such housing developments available to the City Council. You hear from PD, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have the council swear you in.
If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Yes, I do.
And just before you give your first answer, if you could say your name and title for the record. Thank
Certainly.
you.
Josh Levin, Director of Legislative Affairs, NYPD.
Thank you. What crime data does the NYPD currently publish about NYCHA developments, and which data is collected or published at the development level?
So I heard the Deputy Speaker's statement earlier that NYPD does not publish data, so I'm grateful for this opportunity to correct the record. For several years now, we have posted data that is extremely granular, and it is broken down by each individual housing development. It's located on our website, where we put all our other crime, traffic statistics, dashboards, etc. It's really pretty granular. Not only does it go week by week, it also goes by 28-day window look and also a yearly look.
Okay. The bill would require NYCHA to publish the same crime data for each development as it is currently published for each precinct and patrol borough. What crime data does the NYPD currently publish for each precinct and patrol borough?
So if you go, we call it the Eagle Report because it has a picture of an eagle on it. We're very inventive. So if you go on the website and you pull this up, you can see for yourself that it has all the PSA areas. Each PSA area is broken down by borough into the individual precincts, and then each one of those has individual housing developments nestled thereunder. So when you look at it, you'll see the PSA, you'll see the precinct, you'll see the housing development, and then the stats go across.
What will be the benefits of publishing the same data for each NYCHA development?
I believe we want to make sure that people are able to see what is going on in the community as part of the loan report and some other reporting. We post these things publicly.
Okay. And how would NYCHA, how would the NYPD protect residents' privacy and safety when publishing the development level crime data?
So this is the type of thing that is denuded, or there's no PII or personal identifying information in it. It's basically the major sevens plus shootings broken down by each individual housing.
Okay. And does the NYPD's policing of NYCHA developments differ from its policing from other housing developments?
So I think, each different group has to have some type of specialized expertise. And so the harbor unit knows how to deal with boats and, God forbid, tactical emergency operations, right? So the people in housing are being trained on not only things that every police officer needs to know, but also the specific issues that you're going to see if you're in a NYCHA building. And so, for example, something that we do is traditionally has been called verticals, right? Chair Salam has talked to us about verticals before. And so you need to be trained on the layout of the environment and where escapes are and where the roofs are, and you need to be familiar with those buildings themselves.
And when it comes to the Rad Pack developments, does the NYPD publish any crime data for the pack developments?
As I understand it, as long as it is one of the developments, a NYCHA development, we publish it. I can double check and confirm that, though.
And the reporting for the Rad Pack developments, is that also published too as well? Is that put on is that part of the?
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you could both raise your right hand as well. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
And if you could also say your name and title for the record. Thank you.
Chief Charles McAvoy, the Chief of the Housing Bureau. Inspector Howard Gottesman, part of Chief McAvoy's staff.
You can proceed.
So regarding Rad Pack, the way we approach the conversion is whatever PSA or precinct provided police services prior to conversion, they continue to provide it. Therefore, on our report, nothing changes. The Rad Pack developments still appear on the report as if they are NYCHA developments. So a resident of Rad Pack could access this report and look up crime statistics in their development.
Do you see more crime associated with the vacant NYCHA units, and is that something the NYPD tracks?
So we do have a unit that works with NYCHA to help reclaim a percentage or a portion of those vacant units.
And currently, how many of those units are you working on to reclaim?
So we have it broken down by year. This is not a historical unit. It came about in the beginning of 2023, where we did 100 reclamations. Last year, in 2024, for the entire calendar year, we did 356, and currently this year we have reclaimed 92.
92. And is there a breakdown per development?
We could get that. I have every location, but I don't have that breakdown in front of me.
Okay. And also, too, that again, as you said, when you look at the Rad Packs, you just look at it from as though it's a NYCHA development. You're not looking at whether it's converted or still currently Section 9.
Yeah, essentially nothing changes for the police department other than we may have to work with private management when it comes to certain initiatives. Other than that, we proceed as if it was still a NYCHA development.
And when it comes to complaints being made by residents, is there any data that shows the amount of complaints that are coming from residents about vacant units that are not secured?
So we don't have a breakdown in our tracking system specifically for vacant units. We have a 311 system, and we have obviously a 911 system that tracks certain categorical data. To my knowledge, we don't have a subcategory of specifically vacant units.
What is the conversation between you and NYCHA? Is there communication about the particular vacant units that may exist in a particular development, or where there may be a repeat of a squatter that may be in a particular development?
Yeah, so we
in a particular apartment.
Yes, so we have a biweekly, once every 2 weeks, meeting with NYCHA Legal, where they identify the units that need police department intervention. We don't proceed, the police department does not proceed without NYCHA's legal department's permission.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to go back to Section 9 vacancies and the transfers. Do you have any questions? Yes. Yes. And we've been joined by Councilmember Perea.
I got you just
Councilmember
before you're going to
Sanchez,
run away.
and then Councilmember Mealy. You may proceed, Councilmember Vila.
Thank you, thank you. I guess I was curious about, thank you for noting that the data was on. Could you actually, for the record, provide the, how you get there? Because I've been trying to look for it, and I can find the precinct-wide data, but I can't find anything that disaggregates.
If you open a dialog box in Google and just type NYCHA crime statistics and hit enter, the top search, just click on it, a PDF will pop open. That's a 36-page report with all the data.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's helpful for the record as the public is watching and wanting to get access. In terms of, can you talk to us about crime victim services data, how, as it relates to NYCHA residents, how is that data utilized, and are you engaged with NYCHA around it?
I'm sorry, can you just
Are you
rephrase?
collecting any data around the services that are provided to crime victims in NYCHA?
Provided by who?
The agencies that should be providing crime services, like I know you partner with Safe Horizons. Are you tracking any information related to victims of crime in NYCHA?
Well, I mean, the second question was a different question.
Yeah. I'm trying to give you a couple different ways to approach it.
Right. So your first question, to my knowledge, we're not tracking what other partner agencies or non-for-profits are doing. Every once in a while, there may be a mention of it in a dialogue box somewhere that Safe Horizon is on scene or working with a victim. But as far as tracking their information, that's something we don't do.
Okay.
Your second question is a much broader question, and the answer is essentially yes. Of course, we're tracking victim information. That's what.
Right. So you're tracking demographic, but not necessarily referrals or partnerships. And maybe this question is also for NYCHA. What is NYCHA doing with data for crime victims in terms of providing support? I guess it's an area, for context, it's an area that we find very challenging, where folks are just kind of left with no real services. And so we're trying to discern from various perspectives, how are we doing better at providing comprehensive services to victims of crime? So how does NYCHA engage with this data and referrals for services when residents are victims of crime?
It depends, really. We don't always know when our residents are victims of crimes. When we do, we make connections through our family partnerships department. So when we get notified of criminal or police activity on our property, we follow up with the family through Family Partnerships Department and ask if there are resources or services that they can be connected to. And sometimes they accept and sometimes they do not.
Got it. Okay, so you're, I guess, just managing as you see fit. But does NYPD talk to NYCHA about these kinds of stats and the type of services that are provided to people?
Not on a case-by-case basis. However, through our emergency management services, we're notified when there's police activity on our properties, so that we can coordinate any type of response, such as, if a door is forced and we have to fix a door, or if there's some type of activity that we need to clean up afterwards. And so as part of those notifications, we do family partnerships follow-ups to check in with the family and find out, if they need any resources.
Do either of you hold data around, I guess, satisfactory service? If someone particularly is a victim of crime, does either agency go back to the person and say, do you feel like you received adequate support?
I think it depends on the specific individual cases. So for example, in a domestic violence case, yes, we will continue to check in on the person. We had to do check-ins to make sure that they are still safe, that the orders of protection are being respected, that they have access to the resources that they need. When someone is also brought down to the precinct, If you're talking to an SVU detective, if you're talking to a DV detective, they are aware of different organizations as well, and we have posters inside the precincts that also tell people what services are accessible. So I think it depends on the specific individual facts of the case.
But aggregate data you hold around that? That's the question?
I don't believe so, but I can certainly double check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to proceed back to Section 9 vacancies and transfers. And the current backlog of vacant units started several years ago, from December 2021 to December 2022. The number of vacant units increased from 490 units to over 3,300. Can you explain what caused that dramatic increase?
Yes. The primary reason for that increase was the change in the city's lead law that reduced the threshold for lead, and as part of that, we needed to make changes in our program in order to address that. That included reformulating our XRF machines, which are the lead testing equipment that we and HPD use to test for lead. So we had to reformulate those machines. We had to scale up a new program. We also had to go back and retest at the new 0.5 level when we had been testing at the 1 level previously. And so all of that did require a change in our program and did delay and create a backlog that we had to go back and deal with. And again, we use that as a critical marker to say ensure that we are testing all apartments for lead and asbestos as part of the turnover process. And it was at that time that we really ensured that every unit was getting through that process at the start. And so that did create some of the backlog. In addition, we also at that time made a change in how we were matching units. So previously, as soon as an apartment became vacated, we immediately matched it to the next tenant. So it didn't look like it was available anymore, but it was. And residents were then waiting a year after being matched for their unit, which was really problematic. And now we've aligned our policies to match private sector landlords, where you don't see an apartment until it's ready to be occupied. You get to see a newly completed turnover apartment that's really ready for you to move in, and so that you can make a decision whether you want to move in based on what you're seeing. So now we match only after the apartment is finished with the turnover process and ready to be occupied. And so that did delay, in that year you see that more apartments seemed available because we were no longer matching right away.
And from April of 2024 to April of 2025, the number of vacant units increased by an average of 75 units per month. Can you explain what is driving this increase?
I can't exactly reconcile to that specific increase, though I can say we have significantly increased our turnover process. So again, in calendar year 2024, we turned over 52% more units than we did in the previous year. And so we have worked year over year to increase. We're doing now 535 units a month. And that increase in turnover is adding significantly to the apartments that are matching and getting people moved in. However, the total number of vacant units isn't going down because about 60% of the new move-ins are transfers. So for 60% transfers means that when someone moves in, another apartment becomes vacant. So it's very hard to get that total number down because of that.
Okay. Well, the average turnaround time for a vacant unit tripled from 120 days in December of 2021 to 360 days in April of 2025. Can you explain the reason for this increase and what steps NYCHA is taking to reduce turnaround time?
Yes, the reason is all of the environmental work that we have been performing on the apartments that was not previously done. And since 2024, from May of 2024 to May of 2025, we've reduced the turnover time by 25%.
Okay. And can you also share the average time for each stage of the turnaround process, including the lead testing, the abatement, the asbestos testing, the abatement, general repairs, and final inspection and approval?
So lead and asbestos testing and abatement take typically 4 to 6 months, depending on the level of abatement that's required for each of those hazards, and if both are positive. In some cases, you may have one and not the other positive. So it really varies. However, those are the first steps in the process. So we do not allow skilled trades or other staff to come in until the apartment is cleared of both of those hazards. And then you have to remember that our apartments are typically occupied for 25 years. So there's extensive wear and tear and extensive trade work that needs to be done as part of the turnover. We typically have plaster, painting, tiling, new carpentry that has to get done. We're also only doing turnover work as part of overtime. And we, because we are conscious of the competition between our skilled trades time with occupied repairs and residents waiting for work tickets to be completed. So we are doing the turnovers as fast as possible via overtime, and there is limitations in our ability to spend overtime. So that is part of the reason why it can take 352 days to get done.
And what is the average wait time for new applicants, regular priority transfers, and emergency transfers?
So for our standard applicants, the wait time is about 4 years. And for standard transfers, the wait time is about 2.5 years.
And for emergency transfers, do you have a more detailed breakdown of what is the time for the VAWA-related transfers and the reasonable accommodations?
So for emergency transfers, those are waiting on average close to 2 years. For reasonable accommodations, those are waiting on average 2.5 years. And that can vary based on if they're looking for a specific type of apartment, a low floor, accessible. They're looking for a specific development, meaning they want to be close to a medical provider. So that might impact the length of time that they wait.
And for disabled residents requiring a reasonable accommodations, how many requests for accessibility-related transfers are currently pending? And what supports does NYCHA offer while these residents they wait for those accommodations?
By pending, you mean on the wait list, waiting
Correct.
to be matched? So we have about 1,800 reasonable accommodation transfers waiting right now. We canvass those applicants once a year, and just to make sure that they are still interested in the transfer, if they want to make any changes, so we make those adjustments as we receive that information from the tenants.
And when it comes to residents who are domestic violence survivors requiring a transfer, what support services does NYCHA provide while survivors wait for the transfer? And are those partnerships with the domestic violence service providers to ensure continuity of care during this transfer process?
So we also canvass that group periodically, and at the time that we receive the transfer request, we also connect them to Safe Horizon or Sanctuary for Families. We don't keep track of their interactions beyond that first connection, but we, like I said, do check in with them periodically regarding the transfer.
Okay. And has NYCHA explored partnerships with HPD to prioritize domestic violence survivors, disabled residents for placement in HPD's affordable housing programs when NYCHA transfer wait lists are extensive?
I don't believe we have had those conversations with HPD regarding their preference categories for their lottery program, so we certainly can have those conversations if they have not happened.
Well, what percentage of emergency transfers requests are from domestic violence survivors versus disabled residents needing reasonable accommodations?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I said, what percentage of emergency transfer requests from domestic violence survivors versus disabled residents needing accommodations?
Sorry, you're asking what's the percentage of each of those groups?
What's the percentage of emergency transfer requests from domestic violence survivors versus disabled residents needing accommodations?
The numbers are pretty similar between the two groups.
And are there dedicated case managers or liaisons who work specifically with domestic violence survivors and disabled residents to expedite their transfer requests?
We do have a team that manages all transfer requests, and those folks will work with tenants that are requesting emergency transfers and other types of transfers. We no longer have a dedicated team for emergency transfers.
Okay. I'm going to now allow my colleagues to have ask some questions, and we'll allow Councilmember Sanchez to ask her questions. Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you so much, Chair. A lot of energy over here, excitement. Good morning for the next 6 minutes. So I actually just wanted to follow up on the chair's line of questioning around transfers. Could you share how many existing NYCHA residents are waiting for a transfer today?
Sure, we have just about over 8,000 households waiting for a transfer.
Got it. And apologies if I miss this, but that is, you all categorize that in terms of, I heard emergency and reasonable accommodation. Any other categories?
Yes, we have several categories that we use, or several priorities that we assign to each transfer type under our current tenant selection and assignment plan. And those can vary from relocation-related, overcrowding, underoccupied, reasonable accommodations, emergency transfers, and other types of transfers.
Got it. And is there, could you share the prioritization? You said emergency, of course, is at the top, but is there prioritization between those other categories, reasonable accommodation, overcrowding, underoccupied?
Sure. So the top transfer type, or the highest tier of transfer, is a T0, and that captures uninhabitable conditions, relocations, reasonable accommodations. Then we have T1 transfers, and those are related to right sizing, types of moves, either overcrowding or senior families that no longer qualify for senior development. Then we have the T2 priority, and that includes those emergency transfers, victims of domestic violence, intimidated victims, and witnesses. T3 has another group of right sizing, friction between neighbors, and then T4 is the lowest transfer priority, and that one contains overcrowding, hardship for travel related to work or school, and then also families that are looking to move from a general population development to a senior-only development.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So I have just an example of a constituent who has expressed friction with neighbors, for instance. She was told that she had to wait about 5 years for an apartment to become available for her. Is that right? Because that's more than twice what you said is the average transfer time.
It's possible, depending on the wait list, if the size of the apartment that the family qualifies for, their preference on where they want to move. Like some boroughs are more popular than others, and the wait list can be much more extensive.
Thank you. Chair, if I may?
You may.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. And so every time that a neighbor, one of these 8,000 NYCHA residents moves to, is able to transfer, that triggers all of these environmental processes and asbestos remediation and everything else to happen to the unit that they're leaving. Mm-hmm. And is there renovation work also happening in these units, or is this just the bare minimum requirements, XRF testing, et cetera?
No, there's also significant trade work that happens, since our units are occupied on average about 25 years. So there is typically plastering, painting, new cabinets, some tile work in the bathroom, things like that. So there is significant trade work that has to go in as well as part of the turnover.
Got it. And that turnover you said for a unit, it's typically taking about a year?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. When it comes to the trust or pack factor, how do units that get transferred to the trust or into pack factor into your process when calculating turnaround time for units?
So the turnaround time for units is calculated on units that we are currently turning over. Apartments that we are holding off the rent roll for packed are not part of that turnover process. We take them off the rent roll. They will be turned over by the developer as part of the construction that's happening in those.
Okay, and if a development confirms its exit from Section 9, does NYCHA hand off work being done or to the rehabilitated unit?
Yes,
to rehabilitate a unit?
that would all be done as part of the reconstruction and modernization scope that the developer would be proceeding with.
And how's that information shared?
The PACT program under our real estate development department oversees that construction process.
Does NYCHA maintain vacancy or transfer-related information pertaining to a unit once it exits Section 9?
We're not tracking that information. However, our real estate development department receives updates from the developer. I'm not sure if turnover time is something they review, but we can certainly ask them.
Well, the reason why I think that's important is because, when you have tenants who may have the domestic violence issue, and we just don't want to make sure they're being lost in that. And it seems as though that's taken place when a domestic violence victim is waiting for a transfer. And when the conversion takes place, it seems like they're totally lost in the shuffle. And we want to know, why has that been taking place?
So prior to those transfers being canceled for those PAC conversions, we do share that list with the real estate department and our lease housing Section 8 program, so that they have awareness of who.
But are you aware that the transfer opportunities are very limited when a conversion takes place? Are you aware?
Yes, we're aware. So NYCHA is working, and I can't speak too many details on this as this involves the lease housing Section 8 team. We are exploring PAC-to-PAC transfers as part of new policy changes. So that we do understand that the transfer opportunities are limited within just that one development.
So if that particular developer or management company only has one PAC development in their portfolio, is that tenant then relegated to that development if they even considered again for that transfer that was submitted to NYCHA?
I believe that's the case today under the current policy, but as I mentioned, the PAC-to-PAC transfers would open that up to other PAC developments.
Would you
not
agree?
just that developer.
Okay. I mean, would you agree that that time frame or that length of time where that particular tenant is sitting there waiting, and we know that these domestic violence requests, it's obviously an emergency, it puts that tenant in danger?
Yep.
We understand that the limited resource, the limited availability for transfers after conversion, and that's why we are working to open up a PAC-to-PAC transfer process so that residents can transfer within the PACT program.
But in the meantime, you have a resident that is basically sitting there waiting while this conversion is taking place. Is there any information or data to show how quick the new RAD Pack management companies are moving to address that? Is there any follow-up to make sure?
I don't have that data today, but we will follow up with real estate department to see if they have that.
Well, you did say in your testimony that the information is transferred over, am I correct, to the RAD Pack developer?
We share that information with our real estate department and with our leased housing department of existing transfer
Well, then,
requests.
do you have any data? Because obviously we've been converting developments really within the last 10 years. Is there any data or showing how many residents have been transferred over who or have domestic violence requests?
I don't have that information with us today, but we can certainly follow up. I also want to clarify that once a development goes through the PACT process and is reconstructed, their turnover process will obviously be much faster since they've already done the lead and asbestos work. Their occupancy isn't as long anymore. They just had a complete modernization. So I don't have that data with me, but we will follow up with real estate as to what they collect from the PAC developers, if they collect that information. I would know that there would be a faster process since they've just gone through major construction.
Can you provide us with an update on the vacancy readiness program?
Yes, so the city's funding for that is provided, which we are very grateful for, in city fiscal year 25 is approximately $39 million in expense funding and $36 million in capital funding. The capital funding is used entirely to support the asbestos abatement program, and the expense funding is used for the turnover work, the trades work, and other aspects of it. And so that funding is just a portion of the funding that is needed in order to do all the turnovers that we're doing. We estimate it's about 20% of our total cost of turnovers.
Okay. How is NYCHA monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of its process in relation to turnover vacant units and getting people off the wait list?
So on the turnover side, operations review, we have extensive performance management that we've instituted with our teams in operations in order to review the work. We are tracking information on a daily basis, and that is how we've been able to ensure that we've been increasing our productivity in this area by over 50% in the number of turnovers we're doing year over year. We're tracking vacant available units, moving through each step of the process in order to make sure staff are responding. However, again, most of that work is being done through overtime, and so there is limited capacity in order to complete work. As far as the selection process, as I said, we've changed our policies so that selections are not done until the unit is ready for occupancy.
Right.
And so once it's completed on the turnover, it hands back to management, and management will run the selection and choose a tenant and then take it through the lease-up process.
Okay. And in relation to work on vacant units, what specific training do property managers receive on communicating with prospective tenants and coordinating repair schedules and other customer service standards?
So because we are not selecting until the work is complete, there is no coordination with a prospective tenant during the turnover process.
Okay. What quality assurance measures exist to ensure that vacant units are properly repaired before tenants move in?
Our quality assurance department is reviewing a sampling of vacant units. In addition, they've also been instrumental in helping to train property management staff on performance of the turnover work. And so we work closely with our partners in quality assurance to ensure that, if they're finding deficiencies in the work, that's brought back to property management and the skilled trades in order to retrain or correct deficiencies.
I have multiple examples where tenants have been given a transfer and they've moved into an apartment that is still in disrepair. Are you familiar with those instances?
I am not, but I'm happy to follow up on any specific cases that you can share with us so that we can make those corrections.
And when those instances do take place, how quick is the response to correct those deficiencies in that apartment?
I'm not familiar with those cases, but I'm happy to follow
Well,
up.
I'm talking about overall, like what's the, how quick does NYCHA move to correct those deficiencies in the department?
It depends on what kind of deficiency we're talking about. If it's a new work ticket, if it's something that needs to be corrected prior to move-in, if it's something that's after they've been in the apartment a little bit and it's a standard work ticket. I really can't say a time, but I'm happy to follow up on any specific examples that you have.
Well, I mean, I'm just hitting at the quality of insurance and the fact that they say that it's quality assurance, but it's not happening on the ground. Tenants are moving into apartments, and they're still plagued with major issues. And then they're already in that apartment, and then when they're putting in tickets and they say, "Well, I'm in a new apartment, we're having these issues or concerns," NYCHA is not moving as quick to prioritize to make sure that those issues that should have been corrected. So that, again, it's hitting on the fact that what degree of quality assurance is really being done by NYCHA.
Again, I can't speak to those specific examples. What I can say, it's possible that someone moves into an apartment and then immediately experiences a leak from above. Remember, we have an $80 billion capital needs gap, and so there are issues in all of our buildings everywhere. So somebody could move into a perfectly good apartment, experience a leak from above that same week, and have an issue that needs to be corrected. Happy to follow up on any specific cases. Our typical maintenance response time right now is about 3 days. So if someone puts in a work ticket, we will send a maintenance worker to identify the problem and schedule any follow-ups that are needed.
Okay. The Federal Monitor on April 2025 quarterly report mentions that NYCHA completed a project to create a consolidated report card dashboard and incorporate a streamlined set of key performance indicators, which is a KPIs, to document NYCHA's properties performance. Are vacant units and work on such units, including turnaround time and transfer placement, captured? Is it captured in NYCHA's the KPIs?
So we have a vacant unit dashboard that we use in operations to track the work that we're performing. I don't recall now if that's part of the report card, which is still being finalized. But we do have a dashboard that we use to monitor performance. As I mentioned, we're tracking on a daily basis with our teams in order to make sure that our work is moving as efficiently as possible, and that's what's led to a 52% increase in our turnovers this year.
Okay. Well, how are NYCHA's vacant units represented or evaluated?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How are NYCHA's vacant units represented or evaluated?
Evaluated in what way?
In the dashboard.
So we are tracking on a development level how many vacant units we have. We're confirming that the move-out work order was created. Once the move-out work order is created, it should immediately create a work order for lead and asbestos testing. And so then we make sure that it's moving through each of those processes as efficiently as possible. So is the testing scheduled? When the testing was scheduled, did it occur? What were the results? If they test positive, is the abatement then scheduled? Once the abatement is scheduled, has it been completed? Did it go through its quality assurance check? Once it's completed, are the skilled trades then, work orders then set up and scheduled? So we track it to make sure it's moving through every step of the process.
There have been reports of tenants who were approved for a transfer to development before it was converted to PAC. But when they had their approval canceled after the development was converted, how many of those tenants has this happened to?
We don't have that information right now. We can get back to you on that.
I know that was kind of a question we had asked earlier, but I just want to put emphasis on that because we constantly see when these conversions take place, there's so many tenants that are being left in the dark and being left out in the weeds, and especially when it comes to domestic violence situation, that puts them in danger.
And we do reach out to every transfer in the system prior to the conversion in order to work with them and see if there's another development that we can reassign them to, whether they want to change their preference category to a specific development or a different borough. So we do outreach to every single transfer in order, ahead of the conversion, in order to make sure they're aware of what's happening and select a different preference in order to preserve their transfer.
So then if you do that, then what are the numbers? Is there any data showing how many of those tenants you've reached and how many those tenants have been transferred before the conversion has taken place or before they have signed the Section 8 lease?
I don't believe we have that data with us today, but we will follow up with you.
Well, can you share what recourse has been offered to these tenants that had they were previously approved for transfer applications and where they were canceled?
So prior to canceling them, we do reach out to them, as Eva said, to see if they're interested in changing their location, the wait list that they are on. So in order to try to expedite their transfer out, because of our tenant selection and assignment plan and the availability of apartments, we can't always transfer folks out, even in an emergency or even domestic violence situation, because we adhere to the tenant selection and assignment plan.
Well, I mean, you can understand and hope see how that adds insult onto injury when they're in a Section 9, when they're still in Section 9, and then when a conversion takes place and they're totally just left in the dark or just lost in the weeds when it comes to that transfer. Why hasn't NYCHA established at least where there's some type of priority list given to the RADPAC converted developer, and where it's some degree of pressure applied on these developers or this new management company to make those transfers?
As we said before, we do provide those lists of tenants that are in a domestic violence situation.
Well, I'm not. Okay, the actual transfer of those lists, I hear that, but I'm talking about then once that list is transferred over, where's the oversight from NYCHA to make sure that that those transfers are being honored?
We will follow up with our real estate department and get back to you with an answer on that.
And the reason why I continue to bring this up, because some of these developments take close to 3 to 4 years to go to a rehab. And we know that, and I've seen this from experience, most of the developers, when they come in, the focus is on rehab. And it's not on dealing with some of the administrative issues like the transfer, some of the existing requests that have been put in when it was under Section 9. So I'm not confident that NYCHA is really handling these tenants with the care that they demand and need. Do you keep track of these tenants and with the list that you do transfer over to the new developers that are coming in? What continuous conversations are held to make sure that there is a focus on these particular tenants?
Again, unfortunately, I'm not involved in the post-conversion process, and so we'll have to regroup and get back to you on anything that happens after the conversion outside of Section 9.
Are you aware of the status of these tenants and their transfer applications?
I am not personally aware, because once they're outside of Section 9, I'm no longer involved, but we can follow up with the other parties at NYCHA and get back to you.
Okay. These tenants are waiting, and I don't feel that the attention and the priorities being paid attention to them. And it's just another example of NYCHA just handing the keys to these developers and forgetting that these folks are humans. These are human lives that they've been waiting so long to get this transfer. How would you propose, and this is dealing with the tenant selection and assignment plan, the TSAP, How would you propose the TSAP changes expedite the placement of new applicants and transfers?
So with the new TSAP proposal, we've made 3 main areas our priority. We want to make sure that we are optimizing the applicant and tenant rotation cycle, and that means we've restructured from a 4-tier system to a 3-tier system. We are also streamlining the priorities that exist today by consolidating them and adjusting them to meet the current housing needs. And then lastly, we're also refining applicant and tenant choices to improve wait list efficiency and empowering residents with greater flexibility to select their preferred locations. So with a simplification and offering more opportunities for specific urgent priorities like VAWA-related and reasonable accommodations, we do think that there will be more opportunity for folks to be selected and that the wait list will move more efficiently.
Okay. Well, how would the proposed TSAP changes expedite emergency transfer requests?
So in the new proposed system, we are elevating the emergency transfer priorities to a T0 priority, and we're also giving them 2 selection opportunities in a 7 rotation cycle in that tier 3 that I mentioned.
Okay. Currently, the TSAP allows new applicants to select 2 boroughs waiting lists. Why would the new TSAP restrict applicants to selecting only 1 borough?
So currently they select 2 boroughs at the preliminary waitlist stage. Our waitlist is managed in 3 parts. First, when an applicant first applies, they are on the preliminary waitlist and they pick those 2 boroughs, and that helps us identify when we anticipate vacancies which applicants we will invite for an eligibility interview. And then after that eligibility interview, once they're deemed eligible, they're placed on this certified waitlist with the transfers as well. So in the new TSAP, we will only allow applicants a borough choice. Right now, once they pick those 2 boroughs at the eligibility stage, they would pick a development-specific waitlist, and that could take a lot of time because you're on 1 waitlist, right? Mm-hmm. So in the new TSAP, we're proposing that applicants can pick a whole borough, and they would be on every development waitlist in that borough.
When it comes to input from the residents, were the proposed TSAP changes developed with resident input? Because I know you did brief the residents after the plan was done, but can you let us know what input was given by the residents?
So we leveraged resident feedback that we receive throughout our day-to-day interactions with residents inquiring about applicants.
No, was there a formal process or a formal opportunity for residents to give input in this particular plan?
Not in the proposal, but since we released it with the annual plan,
So there was no formal process for the residents to give input into this plan?
We're in the formal process right now. Public comment period opened on Friday and is open until August 2nd.
Thank you. When would these changes go into effect, and what opportunities will residents, well, you said that they're going to have that particular opportunity. When it comes to funding for vacancies, rehabilitations, what is NYCHA's total annual revenue loss from when it comes to vacant units?
I don't have that information with us today. I know that you did ask us for that prior to the hearing. We are working on calculating it, as it's not a straightforward formula the way HUD funds us, so we wanted to make sure we get you accurate information. So we are working on that follow-up for you now. Okay.
Well, I guess I'll just unload on some of these questions here. Well, how much funding is currently available for the vacant units that need repairs? Or of that, how much is tied to any federal funding?
So right now, we're very grateful for the city's support of the of our vacant unit work, and we're receiving a total of $75 million in the current fiscal year, the capital and expense funding that I mentioned earlier. The rest of, we estimate that's about 20% of our total cost of doing vacant units, and the remainder of it is funded through our federal operating subsidy.
Okay. And what percentage of the city budget is allocated to NYCHA operations and capital needs?
I am not sure what we make up as the total percent of the city budget.
What emergency funding can the city access to address some of these the vacancy crisis that exists?
I am not familiar with the city's access to emergency funding. I think that's a question for OMB.
Okay, and is NYCHA receiving support from other city agencies to help reduce vacancies?
Other than the funding we receive from the city, that's the support we're getting.
Well, what joint city and state initiatives exist to address NYCHA's capital needs?
Our capital needs more broadly, or just for vacant units?
For vacant units.
So, well, we're very excited that the state this year has allocated $25 million in the budget for NYCHA for a vacant unit. As you may know, in order to access state funding, we have to enter into a grant disbursement agreement with the state through DASNY, and we're excited to start those conversations and determine how we're going to apply that $25 million in funding.
And has the city considered creating dedicated city funding positions for the vacancy turnover?
I think that's a question for the city.
How many NYCHA positions are currently vacant?
I don't have our staffing vacancy with us, though we don't have a large vacancy. We have improved our ability to rehire, and so right now we are filling frontline positions, I think in around 40 days, and so we have a great relationship with our HR. We're working through civil service lists, and we're able to backfill pretty quickly.
Okay, and has the city conducted any cost-benefit analysis comparing the expense of keeping families in shelters versus renovating a vacant NYCHA unit?
I'm not aware of a specific analysis. However, homeless families are a preference category for us, and I'm very pleased that we've doubled the amount of placements of people coming out of the shelter system into NYCHA this year. And we're expected to reach probably 1,000 homeless placements this year.
Okay, has the mayor set any specific targets for reducing the vacancies, and if so, what are they?
We don't have a specific target for reducing our vacancies. We're just working to improve the process and increase productivity as much as possible.
Has the mayor declared NYCHA vacancy reduction a top priority for this administration?
I'm not aware of that, but he's asked us to work on these issues. The allocation of the funding, both expense and operating through OMB, is a representation of the priority of this program.
Okay. And how are tenant participation activity funds being impacted by vacancies? And what information is being provided to the tenant association presidents for these impacts?
Yes, tenant participation funds are allocated based on occupied units, and so there is an implication for TPA funding overall. If a resident lead, I believe resident leaders are given their TPA allocation with the number of vacant units that it's based off of, or occupied units that it's based off of. And so we do share that information with resident leaders, and if anyone has not received it out there, we're happy to share it again.
Okay. Councilmember Vilas.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up, I think I may have missed it. In terms of the cities, I'm delighted to hear that the state is investing in vacant unit readiness, finally. In terms of the overall capital commitment to NYCHA, what percentage does the city's commitment to the vacant unit readiness make of the capital dollars?
I'm sorry, I don't have our total capital budget with me today.
Okay, could you report back?
Yeah,
because I'm sure it will reflect the commitment to actually getting the units back online.
Though I will say our capital program, the city's capital funding that we're getting is being used for the comprehensive modernization program, as well as significantly for the lead abatement program, which are two critical issues in reducing vacancies.
Particularly because we have a monitor that is closely focused on making sure that we meet those metrics. But yes, however, it probably pales deeply in comparison to the investment in RADPAC just writ large. Paltry investment. In terms of, I just wanted to go back to Red Hook. So the transfer for the houses, so we have 149 families with approved transfer requests, but who are waiting for vacant unit. We have 285 vacant units and a whole host of others in the other categories that are temporarily and all that other stuff. If the whole pot for Red Hook houses is 323 units vacant. So of these 149 families that have their approved transfer requests, we have 59 families in overcrowded conditions, 34 survivors of domestic violence, and 31 families for disabilities. With each of these categories, when can we expect families to be placed in a unit?
It's difficult for us to provide an exact time frame for when a family will be matched to an apartment because there are a lot of different factors that come into play. When we match a family to an available apartment, the priority that they're assigned is a major factor, but the apartment, the bedroom size, the location, if they're looking for a lower floor or an accessible unit, that can really impact the amount of time that they wait for to be matched to an apartment.
So in terms of the 285 units that are sitting vacant, can you give me a breakdown of why they are vacant?
It's the same general categories as I mentioned earlier between permanent and temporarily off the rent roll.
No, but those are accounted for, actually.
Okay.
These are the ones that are just vacant, no designation, just vacant.
Then they're just waiting for us to get to them to do the turnover work. So
And how
have
long
a
is that going
backup.
to take, given we have 34 tenants that are approved for transfers, for domestic violence transfers?
Our average turnaround is 352 days. However, again, it's not guaranteed that those folks waiting for transfers at Red Hook would get these Red Hook units. It depends on the selection. That is.
So I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but why does Red Hook have such an outsized number of vacant units just sitting there?
Some of that, again, is due to what we were holding for comprehensive
How much?
modernization.
How much were you holding exactly?
We were holding. We have released some of those apartments back to the vacant unit. So what I'd like to do is get back to you with a full list. So we released based on updated projections for Gowanus and Wyckoff. And when we release it back to the vacant available, it means that those units are now in the backlog to be turned over. We're still holding some small amount there. So I'd like to get back to you on exactly how much we were holding previously and how much we're holding right now.
Yeah, Gowanus, as far as my list is concerned, that was provided by your data. Gowanus is holding 70 temporary apartments, and then Wyckoff is holding 46. And Red Hook is sitting on 145 east and 140 west. This has to get addressed. This is incredible. I will follow up with you. When we have 125 people, 149 waiting for transfers, I'm actually at a little loss for words. Are any of the units that NYCHA is currently holding related to the Brooklyn Marine Terminal?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Are any of the units that are currently being held vacant in Red Hook being held for RADPAC conversion?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. When it comes to PAC vacancies and transfers, how many vacant units are across the PAC portfolio?
I do not have data on the PAC portfolio with me today.
Well, how does NYCHA exercise oversight of vacant PAC units to ensure that they are rehabilitated and occupied in a timely manner?
So to specifically answer that question, I'll have to get back to you, but just the PACT program goes through a comprehensive modernization. All of those buildings get complete renovation and improvements, and so all of those apartments get fixed up. So as part of the turnover or not, they're getting fixed up. And then vacancies that occur after the construction, I assume will be turned over fairly quickly because it's less wear and tear and it's no environmental. But we'll have to get back to you on any specific data related to the PAC portfolio.
Well, what kind of record keeping does NYCHA require the PAC managers with regard to management of vacant units? And how often is NYCHA receiving these records?
So I oversee the Section 9 portfolio in operations, do not oversee the review of the PAC data, so I'll have to get back to you with that information.
Well, this is a little deeper dive into a particular development. Can you explain why the Fulton Elliott Chelsea environmental impact statement showed a decrease of 17 units in the development?
I do not have that answer with me today, but I can follow up with you.
Okay, and is it true that a unit at Fulton Elliott Chelsea is being used as office space? And can you explain how that decision was made?
I believe that's correct, though I'd have to double check. Right. Yeah. Yes, we are using that. And as I mentioned, we do take units temporarily and permanently off the rent roll in order to facilitate both resident association, community, and other management needs in order to facilitate meeting with residents on site and to make it most convenient for residents. We sometimes take a unit off the rent roll temporarily in order to facilitate that work.
And when it comes to inter-PAC transfers, does the new TSAP plan apply to RAD-PAC developments?
No, the TSAP is only for the public housing inventory.
Why not?
Well, those would be governed partially by Section 8, and there's a Section 8 administrative plan that would govern rules and regulations around the Section 8.
Well, can you give us an overview of NYCHA's new inter-PAC transfer policy?
We are not familiar with the intricacies of that policy. That's managed by the Leased Housing Section 8 program.
Well, was the inter-PAC transfer policy developed with feedback from many of the residents?
I can't speak to that.
I can't speak to that either.
When did the policy go into effect?
I'm actually not sure if it's in effect. I know that we were very close to implementation.
Well, can you explain how the inter-PAC transfer policy differs from the TSAP or transfer policy from Section 9?
I think we'd have to follow up with you to make sure we have the subject matter experts on that policy here to answer those questions.
Well, why doesn't the inter-PAC transfer policy allow transfers from PAC to Section 9? And if a PAC resident wants to transfer to Section 9, what are those options? What options are available?
It would be a new admission, so that once they sign their Section 8 lease and they become a Section 8 resident, they're no longer a Section 9 resident.
Okay. And so why can't a PAC resident request a transfer to a specific development or borough?
Within the Section 9 program?
Yeah.
They can apply as a new public housing applicant and be placed on the...
But not as an existing.
Are you saying prior to...
Well, prior to the conversion, yeah.
Yes, they can submit a transfer, but when it comes to the conversion date, as the conversion date approaches, if that tenant is not going to be reached, that's when we cancel their transfer.
Well, NYCHA's website says that the inter-PAC transfers are limited to the following transfer categories. One, a court action, intimidated victim, intimidated witness, a VERA 24-hour life-threatening, housing quality standards violations, fire, natural disaster, reasonable accommodation, which is to a larger unit, lower floor elevator. Why are the Interpack transfers limited to just those categories?
Council member, with all due respect, unfortunately, we're not able to speak to that today because there's a different subject matter experts at NYCHA that handle the leased housing program, of which the Section 8 program is managed, as well as the real estate department that manages the PACT program.
Well, has NYCHA... I just want to get this on the record. So
Understood.
Maybe if you find the answers or information, you can tender it to us. Or has NYCHA considered creating a cross-portfolio transfer system that would allow domestic violence survivors or disabled residents to access units across Section 9, PAC, or Trust, and potentially affordable housing provided by HPD in order to reduce the wait times?
We are exploring policy options to allow Section 9 and Section 8 NYCHA that are managed under NYCHA to transfer across programs.
And does the Interpack transfer policy apply to tenants who requested a transfer prior to the development being converted to PAC?
The transfer reasons after conversion are managed by or are guided by the Section 8 admin plan, so Eva and I cannot speak to those topics.
And what is the role of the PAC managers in the Interpack transfer process? And do they have say in who's approved for a transfer?
We will follow up on answers to that.
Well, for the record, what is NYCHA's oversight over Interpack transfers, and does NYCHA access PAC managers' data on Interpack transfer requests?
We will follow up on that.
Since, for the record, since the Interpack transfer policy went into effect, how many PAC residents have been transferred or put into transfer wait lists?
We will follow up on that.
For the record, of those, how many transfers within the same PAC development or to another PAC development, to a private rental unit or tenant-based Section 8 assistance, or to another public housing agency with tenant-based Section 8 assistance?
We will follow up on that.
Okay, and for the record, what is the average wait time for the Interpack transfers?
We will follow up on that.
We're looking forward to you following up on all of those questions. I just wanted to get those on the record. With that being said, we thank you for your testimony and for your opening statements. And thank you so much for the demonstration.
Thank you.
We've been also joined by Councilmember Salamanca, who is with us by Zoom. I'm opening the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant of Arms and for inclusion into the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, obviously, please feel free to fill out the appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes. You would have 2 minutes to speak to today's hearing topic, vacancies and transfers, or to the 2 bills we are hearing today. If you wish to submit a written statement or additional written testimony for the record, please give a copy to the Sergeant of Arms. You may also email written testimony or to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. We will now proceed we have Anna Loaf from NYLAG, Luis Henriquez, Elizabeth Branty, Mathen Scarcy, Edna Wells, Mandy, Elizabeth Rodriguez, and Christopher Leon Johnson. Good afternoon. You may proceed. Yes, make sure the red light is on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Greetings, Chair Banks and members of the New York City Council Committee on Public Housing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on these important measures that will provide a much-needed increase in transparency for the NYCHA community. My name is Anna Luft, and I am the Public Housing Justice Project Director in the Tenants' Rights Unit at NYLAG. PHJP is the first team of legal advocates solely dedicated to directly representing public housing residents in New York City. First, I'd like to speak about vacancies. Addressing NYCHA's vacancy rate is about the stability of both NYCHA households and the housing authority itself. 19% of NYCHA's budget is from its rental revenue, and yet since 2020, vacancy rates have more than doubled from close to 0% to 2%. As the future of federal funding for NYCHA is called into greater uncertainty, and NYCHA calls residents into housing court for COVID-era arrears, it is unacceptable that so many units remain vacant, and NYCHA willingly forgoes the potential income from these units. Indeed, each time we appear in housing court on a non-pay or at the NYCHA Office of Impartial Hearings on a termination of tenancy based on chronic rent delinquency, the NYCHA L&T attorneys act like the missed rental income from that single unit will be the undoing of the housing authority. Meanwhile, NYCHA is sitting on thousands of unoccupied units that could be a part of the rent roll but are not. But more importantly to our clients, NYCHA's failure to move vacant units promptly results in due process violations, exacerbating existing inequities and destabilizing families and communities in the process. NYCHA residents seeking transfers based on overcrowding, it's fast. As you can imagine, long wait times for transfers can have cascading effects for our clients, with many facing loss of their housing due to NYCHA's profound inaction and the disconnect between the law department and those who spoke earlier today. By way of example, we represented Mr. S in a termination of tenancy based on allegations that he was failing to occupy his apartment. However, the only reason he was not in his apartment was because he was wheelchair-bound in a nursing home and the facility would not discharge him until he was transferred to an accessible unit. The NYCHA Law Department insisted on continuing to prosecute this case even after they were aware of that. While ultimately we prevailed and his tenancy was not terminated, he died in the nursing home, waiting years for his transfer. Ms. W lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her husband and 5 children. That's 7 people in a one-bedroom apartment. In addition to the severe overcrowding, she had also been assaulted in the development and requested an emergency transfer on that basis. Finally, the physical condition of her apartment was so deteriorated that ACS opened an investigation for her family and made a referral directly to NYCHA, stating that the apartment conditions and overcrowding were unsafe for children and they needed a transfer.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
All right. I'm just going to give you one more example because you asked about crime victim services earlier. Another client of ours, Mr. O, we represented in a failure to occupy case at the Office of Impartial Hearings. Mr. O was a crime victim. He had been essentially kidnapped in his own apartment, held hostage for months before the NYPD eventually conducted a raid and released him. NYCHA brought a failure to occupy while he was waiting for a safety transfer. And then when we explained to the NYCHA Law Department why he wasn't in his unit, amended the charges for non-desirability because of the people who had been residing in the apartment while he was being held hostage. I offer this very abbreviated testimony. You have my longer testimony there to emphasize that there needs to be a stronger connection between the policy presented by the NYCHA executives earlier today, the law department, and our clients' actual due process rights. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. You may proceed, sir.
Am I on now? Yes.
You are.
Thank you, Chair Banks. Good morning. My name is Luis Enriquez, and I am the Director of Litigation at Manhattan Legal Services, which is part of Legal Services NYC. I'm also one of the authors of the report that you mentioned in your opening remarks. My organization published a report in December 2024 in which we intended to shine a light on who we are talking about when we are talking about transfers and vacancies and those folks who are on the wait list, right? The grim, unacceptable, and thank you, Chair Banks, for using the word unacceptable also in your opening remarks, because when we're talking about 2,000 DV survivors who on average are waiting 800 days, 797 to be exact, for a transfer, or when we're talking about 1,700 people living with disabilities who are waiting 400 days for a transfer, the first thing we need to say is that that is unacceptable, right? We can then talk about the policy and what do we do next. I was hoping actually this morning to hear NYCHA start their testimony saying that the reality faced by survivors of domestic violence and by people living with disabilities is unacceptable. They didn't do that, right? In the interest of time, I'm going to cover just a few highlights from my testimony. One thing that wasn't mentioned this morning, I heard NYCHA COO talk about various reasons for why the turnover rate has spiked up in the past 5 years. Page 3 of my testimony, I have a graph here. FY20, 98 days average turnover rate. FY24 rose to 424 days. During that same period of time, and that is the graph on the bottom, staff vacancies, specifically in the division that handles apartment turnover, the ATAT, and we had Sylvia Audi here this morning, who is the director of that department. Staff vacancies rose from 5 vacancies to more than 2,000 vacancies in that same year period. Cumulatively, over 6,000 staff vacancies in the division that is entrusted with turning over apartments. So there is a near perfect correlation between NYCHA bleeding staff, the staff that are entrusted to turn over apartments, and the average turnover rate spiking up in the past 5 years. And this point goes a little bit into intro one round from Council Member Aviles. We think that legislation would be beneficial to NYCHA tenants because it will increase accountability and transparency for NYCHA to publish how many apartments are vacant and the reasons why. We would suggest that that bill go further and force NYCHA to say not only the reason why apartments are held vacant, but what efforts NYCHA has expended in the past calendar year to make sure that those apartments are turned over. So for example, when it comes to the understaffing that I just mentioned, NYCHA should not just say in their report, this amount of apartments are vacant and we have this many thousands of positions that are vacant. NYCHA should also say, what efforts did it took in the past calendar year to refill those vacant positions, right? What did NYCHA petition the City Council for funding, right? What type of publications or what type of hiring or training has NYCHA done, right? So we believe that the legislation could be strengthened if NYCHA is required to not only say this many apartments were vacant and this is why, but also add, and this is what we're doing to turn around the corner on this very big problem that NYCHA has with the vacant units crisis. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, Chair Banks.
Thank you for your testimony and your report. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Banks and esteemed members of the Committee on Public Housing. My name is Elizabeth Brantle, and I serve as the Government Relations Coordinator for the Center for Justice Innovation. The Center is a community justice organization that partners with courts, communities, and those most impacted to promote safety, racial justice, and stability, including through housing. Across our sites, we are seeing troubling delays in the NYCHA transfer process. Tenants regularly wait years to be moved, even when facing urgent situations such as the need for ADA-compliant housing, emergency safety concerns, or uninhabitable living conditions. With over 5,000 units sitting vacant last year, these delays are unacceptable. Last year, one of our clients survived an armed home invasion where his father was shot. Even after this, their family has waited over a year for a safety transfer. We had a client whose daughter became ill due to the mold and lead in their apartment. Even though her transfer was approved and she put down the security deposit on the new apartment, NYCHA delayed for so long that she was forced to live with friends. NYCHA then took her to housing court over the unpaid rent on the unlivable apartment and canceled her transfer. Only through legal advocacy was her transfer reinstated and her family was finally given safe housing. We are now working with a client who has waited over 3 years for a transfer after mold and mildew from leaks made his apartment hazardous. Currently, NYCHA policy states that transfers will not be approved for residents who are in active housing court proceedings for failure to occupy. However, this fails to consider that the very reason tenants are in housing court may be related to their transfer request. NYCHA residents deserve better. We urge the Council to push for clear timelines, better communication, and accountability for NYCHA to ensure that no family has to endure these conditions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chair, Committee Council, staff members, fellow witnesses. My name is Edna Wells Handy, and I am the founder of the National Institute for Section 3 Empowerment, or the NISE. We are a nonprofit New York State 501c3 committed to ensuring that public housing residents and other low-income individuals are prioritized for job opportunities. Excuse me, I've been sitting here a long time and it's cold, so my voice is acting out. Sorry.
It's okay.
Are prioritized for job and contract opportunities. I'll be brief. We recommend 3 solutions to the matters covered by this bill. 1, train and employ NYCHA residents to rehabilitate vacant units. The most immediate and sustainable path to turning units around faster is already authorized under Section 3 of the HUD Act, which requires that low-income residents be hired for jobs generated by HUD-funded projects. We strongly urge the Council to support the creation of a resident repair corps, a Section 3 compliant workforce initiative that hires and trains public housing residents to turn and help turn over vacant units more rapidly. This is not new. Our second solution, therefore, is build on what works. There are three models we bring to your attention. Chicago has leveraged Section 3 housing and small contractor programs to create resident job pipelines for maintenance and rehab work, reducing unit turnaround time while building skills locally. Philadelphia's resident maintenance trainee program brought in residents for apprenticeships, and an Australia model promoted by Community Services by Roseanne Haggerty modeled the program here in New York. We believe that there's an opportunity in most of the legislation that's before you for Section 3 involvement. We are here to work with you and members of the council as part of our effort to provide for universal understanding. Our goal is to meet with all 51 of you to show you how, one, Section 3 is working in your district, and two, how to work with the wonderful tool that, I'm sorry that Councilwoman or Councilmember Aviles is not here, the tracker. The tracker is an underutilized mechanism that is at your disposal, and we're here to assist you. And we recommend, again, the resident training program for turnovers.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now move to our Zoom testimony. Okay, we will now move to our Zoom testimony. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant of Arms will give you a go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. Elisa Hall.
You may begin.
Okay. Good afternoon. NYCHA is being directed to make publicly available an annual report on public dwelling units that have been vacant for more than 30 continuous days. An annual report would provide information that is 1 year old and possibly outdated. NYCHA can produce and publish an updated report every 30 days in real time. This would prevent a family desperate for a place to live to miss out on opportunities to find housing. The real estate industry knows within hours what housing is available. NYCHA has incorporated a real estate operation into its business model to transition away from managing its buildings. This action has allowed NYCHA to turn over its daily management operation to private management companies under the RAD PAC program. NYCHA does whatever it wants to do regarding its properties, including the sale of properties, an example, the sale of Boston Seacourt houses in the Bronx to Wave Crest Management Group and the BRC Master Tenant LLC located in Boston, Massachusetts, without informing the tenants. This action violated HUD Regulation 964, the Tenant Participation and Tenant Opportunities in Public Housing Rule, which ensures tenants' rights and responsibilities in the decision-making process. Regulation 964 mandates that tenants have a say in managing and maintaining housing developments while protecting their tenancy rights. And private ownership ignored HUD Regulation 964, starting with adding unexplained arrears on monthly rent statements for tenants who signed the PAC lease and those who did not sign the PAC lease. And
Thank you. Your time expired.
extra time, please.
30 seconds to wrap it up, ma'am.
Okay. The tenants are required to sign leases before the PAC program received HUD approval for the conversion to private Section 8. So a monthly report could show available inventory of apartments and review the compliance by housing authorities and private partnerships to adhere to the laws of Section 9 and HUD Regulation 964 to remain accountable to the tenant's needs. And it would highlight cases of success or failure in meeting the goals of the program. And some people have $30,000 in arrears since the program was implemented at their development. we will submit the rest of the 4-page testimony to the city council. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Hall. Simone Hall.
You may begin.
I'm the mother and I have the same complaint. It was being directed to publicly make available an annual report. You don't need a year to make an annual report. You can make a baby in 9 months, so I don't see why you have to wait for a year to be told that there are vacancies. Everyone in every project knows where there are vacancies, and nothing is being done to alleviate that problem. And this causes more people to be without a place to stay. Some are sleeping in cars. They're sleeping in the subways, and they're in the staircases, and all of this is happening now. So we don't want that to happen to anyone. The homeless crisis is especially bad because of NYCHA's negligence and making repairs and getting things up to date. So I don't know, Ms. Banks, I want to thank you for your very pertinent questions, and you are on the ball. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Hall. We'll now move to Renee Keith.
You may begin.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Banks and members of the committee. My name is Renee Kitt. I'm both a resident of the Elliott Chelsea Houses and the president of our resident association. I'm here to raise serious concern about what's happening in our community under the guise of choice and improvement. Once a decision has been made for us, not by us, that our development is being pushed into PAC, it is as if we no longer count. Our homes and families are treated as liabilities on a spreadsheet, not as communities with history, stability, and rights. If you look at the NYCHA metrics dashboard, it shows only 4 vacancies between Fulton and Elliott Chelsea houses. But when you examine the non-dwelling units, there are 199 listed. This is how they're masking true vacancy numbers by reclassifying livable apartments as non-dwelling. It artificially lowers the vacancy rate and creates the illusion that our buildings are obsolete, when in reality, they are being warehoused. To make matter worse, 2 of our apartments are currently being used by Housing Opportunities Unlimited, a relocation contractor known for their involvement in PZS RAD conversion, including Linden Houses. These are apartments that could and should be used by NYCHA residents, Section 9, particularly those on transfer lists or in unsafe units, but instead they are being handed over to outside consultants who are there to facilitate the PAC process and ultimately the demolition of our homes. At Fulton, 11 households have been selected to move in. But instead of being welcomed into a stable home, they're being drawn into a misleading process, one that pushes them to self-evict by dangling a supposed lottery and urging them to act quickly to secure their spot and in an undefined future. This is not resident choice, this is managed displacement. The proposed bill, Intel 0111-2024, will require NYCHA to report publicly on all units that have been vacant for more than 30 days. While this sounds promising, I must emphasize such a bill is only as good as the numbers NYCHA chooses to disclose. As I have just discussed,
Thank you. Your time expired.
Good getting the real picture.
Thir-
I have 30 more
30
seconds.
Yes, 30 seconds.
Thank you. At hiding the real picture through reclassification and data manipulation. As Ms. Hall just discussed, this should be done on a weekly basis on a live dashboard. Meanwhile, residents await transfers at Fulton and Elliott Chelsea are being sidelined. These delays are not accidental, they are strategic. They serve to clear a path for the demolition of these buildings and the handoff of public land to related in essence, it can only be described as a 21st century land grab. We are not against improvement, we are against being erased. We demand a just process, a meaningful vote, and real estate and real investment in our communities, not demolition disguised as revitalization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony and advocacy. We'll now move to Ramona Ferreira.
You may begin.
Hi, everyone. This is Ramona Ferreira from Safe Section 9, and I'm going to highlight for you some of the solutions that we came up with regarding vacancies and the transfer process that's currently not serving the tenants of Section 9 public housing. We are asking the council to consider incorporating the following recommendations in any legislation having to deal with transfer requests. We wish that NYCHA uphold HUD's transfer regulations or rules for developments in the process of converting out of Section 9 to RAD and PAC. Basically, when a development is undergoing conversations regarding conversions, tenants are supposed to be offered an opportunity to take a transfer to another Section 9 development closest to them, and this is not being done. We want for NYCHA to provide publicly accessible statistics on how many people are actually requesting a transfer and wishing to stay within Section 9 when a conversion is being faced by their development. How many of these families accept the transfers and how many are not honored. We want RAD and PAC partners to clarify the timeline for conversion so that we can better understand at what point transfers are being frozen at the development. We want for RAD and PAC partners to create or make a public transfer tracking system so that tenants have access to information on their status of their transfer and can get real-time updates. We would want partners for our RAD and PAC to be held accountable, provide transparent communication to tenants regarding their transfers before and after a conversion, and demand that they identify point people at each development that can actually address the questions of the tenants. And then we wish to have an investigation into the currently 5,000 vacant units, the job portal.
Thank you. Your time expired.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And we would want to see why NYCHA is not actually hiring for the transfer units and making sure that we have skilled labor that can bring down the wait time on these transfers and vacancies. Thank you.
And Ramona, can you just forward those recommendations to my office?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We'll now proceed, and thank you for your advocacy and thank you for your testimony. I will now proceed to Linda Harrison.
You may begin.
Linda Harrison, you may proceed with your testimony. We'll now move to Karen Blondell.
You may begin.
Good morning. Thank you for hosting this hearing, Chairman Banks. I work with Fatima Turner-Williams at the Red Hook Houses. We do have a way of knowing what the vacancy numbers are because we talk to each other on a regular basis. I want to add that there may have been an increase in vacancies not only because of comp mod, but also from my own knowledge, not everybody turns in keys, Chairman. And without having those keys back, New York City Housing Authority has to go through a process to secure those apartments. So on behalf of the Red Hook West Houses and Ms. Fatima Turner, I can say that this woman has been doing her job. Our numbers are going down. The residents are coming to me, and I invite you to come out for a tour. The is getting done. Everybody's bounced back. The pandemic, and at the same time, there's a lot going on. Like my council member evaded to. There's an opportunity for $200 million for capital needs, plus 200 apartments in the Brooklyn Marine Terminal project that is going to be voted on within the next week. So I thank you for your time. And again, this is my third time asking you, can you please come to Red Hook for an actual tour? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your advocacy and thank you for the invite. We will definitely try to make it over to Red Hook to do a tour. Thank you again. Thank you for your testimony. Now we'll proceed to Christina Chase.
You may begin.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Christina Chase. I'm second vice president of Ravenswood Houses and a steering committee member of Justice for All Coalition, a grassroots tenants rights group in Western Queens. Thank you, Councilmember Banks, for your critical leadership, and Councilmember Aviles and Ayala for your unwavering support too, and for NYCHA residents, as reflected by these bills. I support these bills and look forward to engaging with the additional data, which will allow us to fully understand what is happening at the development level for residents, both with vacancies and policing. I wanted to uplift the vacancy numbers at Ravenswood Houses, as well as our neighboring development 4 blocks away, Queensbridge Houses, also my childhood home. Ravenswood, we have 64 out of 2,160 vacancies, so that's 3%. Queensbridge North, 70 out of 1526, so that's about 5%. And Queensbridge South, 91 out of 1,582, so that's about 6%, which is double that of Ravenswood. And so that's really concerning. We need those apartments to be brought back online, considering how many families are on the waiting list, but also because their vacancies are causing safety concerns and issues, and other related concerns that my residents are really um, they want to see repaired are broken doors and locks, broken intercoms, broken and old mailboxes that need to be replaced so packages aren't stolen. Today's hearing highlighted for me one thing, which was how one RAD PAC conversion impacts a whole neighborhood and the whole city at large. It's clear how PAC destabilizes our communities and our families. We cannot afford to let it continue, especially since our federal resources are scarce and under attack. We cannot let another penny for public housing go to RAD PAC or any of its related initiatives. We must take seriously what a RAD moratorium bill looks like. Let's meet, let's write it up, let's mobilize, and let's get it passed. Some of you know me as an advocacy coordinator at Take Root Justice, and I would wear all my hats to
30
make
seconds to
real
wrap it up.
um, this moratorium. So let's protect what's left of public housing in the city and in this country. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your advocacy. And thank you for your testimony. We will now proceed to Jacqueline Laura.
You may begin.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Lara. I live in Fulton, and I'm speaking that we, the residents, do not want demolition, and we need to somehow hold NYCHA accountable of how they're harassing the residents at Fulton Building 11. They're coming to me asking me if they should sign this or sign that because they have HOU coming to them and telling them that they have to move, and NYCHA sending them letters that they have to leave the premises so they could demolish that building. So please, somehow, some way, we have to hold NYCHA accountable. I don't care. We have to hold them. We don't want no demolition at all. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now move to Teresa Scott.
You may begin.
Peace and blessing. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to give honor to God and to the council for speaking tonight. It is sad that the people living in these conditions and that NYCHA doesn't seem to understand the danger that people are living in and the oversight that is happening with NYCHA. And every time we have a meeting, they don't know anything. That's their regular story. I really believe that Save Section 9 need to come and get with NYCHA, the people that does the executives, and let us train them because they come here every meeting with the same story. I can't answer that question. Yes, they don't have the answer because they're not concerned about us. We need to stop the injustice. Like, what I'm in awe of is that they actually are raising their hand and making an oath that they're going to tell the truth. If that was one of us, we would be put in jail right away. Why isn't NYCHA punished for them always these courts and not making sure that they have the right people with the right answer? They know what the subject is about, and they purposely come here every time saying, I don't know the answer or I can't answer. That is a purpose. That is on purpose, and that is causing people to suffer. We have residents who are living in places that are living in dust. They know that we living in dust. They say that they have all of these information. They have all this data. I need to see where the data is at. I need to see the information on some kind of application that says, hey, show me all these people that they visit. We have residents who said that the NYCHA has not done any of these programs that they said they have implemented. So why are they allowed to come here and lie every time and never be accountable? They say they're going to get back to it. I need to be personally see the
Thank you. Your time
information
expired.
alone.
Ms. Scott, you have 30 seconds to wrap it up.
I need to see the information and the data. We need to stop. We need to put a memoriam to stop red, so that some of these things are happening with the people that are living in red, so it can stop, because it's not fair that these people are living in such horrible conditions. And NYCHA always has the same answer: I don't know. They know, they don't care. And there's a scripture that says that God sees the wicked, and they need to know. I'm serving a notice from God that just as much as you're doing wicked for people in NYCHA, the same thing could happen to you. So you need to be careful. This has nothing to do with safety. This is my personal opinion. The same thing and just that you're doing tonight going to happen to you and your families. And because you're part of such a wicked system, no telling what happens. So you need to be careful when you come to these tenants, to these hearings, spewing these lies and this data that you don't seem to find.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, for your testimony and your advocacy. Now we'll proceed to Christopher Leon Johnson.
You may begin.
Yeah, hello. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you, Chair Banks, for having us here today. To make this clear that, first off, the City Council needs to put a bill into the City Council to eradicate CCOP, because CCOP is the reason why NYCHA is always able to get away with what they got to get away with, because they always use those people to say, like, well, NYCHA's doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing, but they're not. NYCHA is working with the developers, like, related to displace everybody in Fulton, Chelsea, and Fulton, Chelsea houses all over the city, including all over the city. But their main experiment is Fulton, Chelsea houses, and they try to turn the site down. So, like I said, we need to call for the eradication of CCOP. I'm calling on this City Council Chair, Christopher Banks, to disassociate himself with from Tanisha Grant, who is part of RPPH, because RPPH is control opposition that is ran by Marquise Jenkins, and who works for Carmen Rivera. And Rivera is the biggest control opposition, biggest YIMBY elected official in the City Council. She is hell bent on destroying NYCHA with the developers. How are you saying that you're fighting for the people, at the same time you're working with RPPH, which is a organization that works with Carly Rivera and Harvey Epstein, that is hell bent on destroying the Lower East Side with the developers? The same time that these vacancies are the reason they won't say the vacancies, because the vacancies are high, and they want the vacancies to be so high because they could adjust by these NYCHA to abolish these buildings for the developers. They see these people as eyesore. They see these people as roaches. That's the truth. I don't see them. I love them. NYCHA does not want the people here no more. They want the people out. They want the open New York for all transall YIMBYs in those units, because they willing to pay the market rate rent, or even 3, 4, 5 times the amount of rent they could pay for the stuff. So, like I said, this is what's going on here. So, like I said, Mr. Chris Banks need to dissociate yourself from Mr. Tanisha Grant, because she is the biggest problem of this stuff, because she is control opposition from these developers to make sure that they protect Jamani Williams, who is a public advocate. So, like I said, Mr. Chris Banks.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
30 seconds. Like I said, 30 seconds. Like I said, Mr. Chris Banks, as the chair of the City Council Housing Committee, you need to dissociate yourself from Tanisha Grant. Make sure that she does not be in the public the pre-panel, because she is control opposition sent by Mr. Marquis Jenkins to protect Jamani Williams, who is part of the eradication of NYCHA.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Thank you. If we have inadvertently missed anyone that has registered to testify today and has yet to have been called, please use the Zoom raise hand function if you are testifying remotely, and you will be called into order that your hand has been raised. If you are testifying in person, please come to the dais. Okay. And we actually had a missed person. I just want to, announce their name again. Methane Scarcy. Please come to the dais. All right. Seeing none, I will now close the hearing. Thank you to all the members, the administration, the members of the public who have joined us today to discuss this very important topic. This hearing is now